We're just shuffling here. If you just give us a minute.
So the music stop.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is 3:32 p.m. and delighted to see so many people here in person and online for the August 27th Government Oversight and Committee on Children's joint hearing on the performance audit by the auditors of public accounts. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and convene the meeting and ask the chairs if they have any sort of comments. My co-chair, oh, there she is. Senator Gadkar Wilcox.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just happy to see everyone. I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. It is a religious holiday today, so happy Ganesh Chaturthi for anyone who celebrates. And I'll just be joining via Zoom. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. To the chairs of Children's, Senator Marr.
Just want to thank you for calling the meeting, and I look forward to the conversation and learning more. Thank you.
Great. Representative Paris.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for convening this. I would just like to also take care of just one housekeeping note of wishing our good Vice Chair of the Children's Committee, Mary Welander, a very happy birthday. Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, wonderful for you to be here on your birthday. I know. Turning 30 is so exciting, too. With that, is Senator Sampson online? I'm sure he'll tune in at some stage. I know there's a few other things going on today. Representative Carney.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and happy birthday, Representative Welander. I'm just thank you for putting this meeting together, and I'm looking forward to asking some questions. So thanks.
Wonderful. Representative Daphne.
Thank you and happy birthday. You do look really good for 30. I'm impressed. Anyway, I'm happy to be here and looking forward to moving forward and getting our questions answered. Thank you.
Wonderful. Is the ranking senator? Yeah, is he going to be joining? I don't see him. He's probably caught in another meeting as well.
He's on the Zoom.
Oh, I
Senator
don't.
Perillo.
Senator Perillo, would you like to say anything?
No, Madam Chair, thank you very much. I think we're all excited to be here. This is an opportunity to address some concerns that have been raised. I'm looking forward to it, and I appreciate everyone who pulled this together. It's very important. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. With that, we're going to kick off the event by having first the auditors of public accounts. If you could please introduce yourself before you give your testimony, I greatly appreciate it. I know you've done this before.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm John Garagosian, one of the state auditors. State Auditor Craig Miner sends his regrets. He couldn't be here today. I'm here more of a supporting role today, although my folks had me sit in the hot seat. But happy to be here today to share the good work of our office. And from the outset, I'd like to just say that we really respect the work that DCF does and understand how hard their job is. But our goal is always to make things work better and point out some observations that we see along the way. With that, we have a short presentation for you, and I'd like to introduce Scott Simoneau, who's one of our principal auditors, and Margaret Bloom, who's an auditor too in our office. Some of the folks that have been around for a while might recognize Scott from his years in program review and investigations, and we're very happy to have him working for our office. So Scott, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And as John said, I am Scott Semino. I'm a principal auditor with the Auditors of Public Accounts. So Margaret and I are just going to share some very brief highlights from our performance audit of the Department of Children and Families' response to children missing from care for fiscal years 21 through 23. The purpose of the audit was just to evaluate how well DCF's policies and procedures work when a child in foster care goes missing and how effectively DCF collaborates with law enforcement in those situations. Now, for those who are interested in some of the finer details, there's an overview of the process that DCF follows for monitoring, locating, and monitoring missing children in the audit report on page 46. And we would point out that the report was published in this just past June of 25. Spent about 2,300 hours on this audit. The report also contains DCF's responses to the findings as of April of 2025. So before we jump into the report findings, we've been asked, how do we evaluate agencies and how do we use best practices, overall in our audits? So, in general, we evaluated the Department of Children and Families against specific criteria, right? First and foremost, we look at any applicable legal obligations. And, we want to know, what does the law require the department to do? Next, we examine DCF's own goals and operating guidelines. And, what does that entails? What does the agency say that it's doing? And then we also consider best practices from a variety of recognized sources, such as the federal government agencies and professional organizations. And the perspective for here is, what should the agency be doing ideally? So in this case, there were some best practices regarding human trafficking from the federal government that we found. Some of those were actually incorporated into federal law, and we evaluated the agency against some of those requirements. We also found that there was the Child Welfare League of America had probably the most comprehensive best practices for how to handle all phases of missing from care episodes, on which we referenced several times in the report. So overall, the report produced 17 findings and 30 recommendations. Now, we summarized and grouped the findings here into 5 categories, which we'll just touch on briefly in this presentation. However, we do want to spend just a little more time on the first 2 findings, which are a little more systematic in nature. So our first principal finding is that DCF, did not formally evaluate missing from care episodes or have a formal strategy to prevent them from reoccurring. Now, without a regular analysis of patterns and risk factors of this population, it's difficult to target prevention efforts effectively. So we analyzed some of the DCF data, and in our review of that data over the 3-year period, the scale of the issue was kind of striking.
Can you just hold on for a second while we sort out the technical issue? Great, we're good. Thank you. Sorry, please continue.
No problem. So over the 3-year period, there were over 600 children. They were nearly all teenagers. They accounted for over 3,700 missing from care episodes. The number of rate of these episodes increased over time. We found that most children were for congregate care settings. Most were female. Many of these children went missing repeatedly. We noted that 9% of the children, only 9%, represented the majority of all episodes, with one child having done so over 100 times. Now, we note in the report that the risks to these children are substantial, ranging from trafficking and health problems to educational disruption and justice system involvement. So we recommended that DCF conduct a detailed analysis of this population and create a prevention plan with clear and measurable goals. Now, the second area, major finding, we found that the state's service array, which is sort of the continuum of placements and supports that are available, just couldn't meet the needs in some of the most complex cases that we examined for children who are missing from care. So we initially pulled a selection of case records to look at various compliance issues, and among them were cases where DCF staff and community providers documented concerns that the child's placement was, in fact, unsafe. So from this group, we selected 6 of these cases for an in-depth analysis of service needs. Now, it's likely that more than 6 cases involved unsafe or inappropriate placements, But we limit our review of service to these 6 due to the time commitment of reviewing individual case files that can be hundreds of pages long. Now, what we found that these children tended to be older teens with histories of trafficking and other severe behavioral health needs. They couldn't access appropriate placements because of gaps in capacity, long wait lists, and placement denials. Their behaviors were acute, but not necessarily psychiatric in nature, meaning that they didn't meet the criteria for the higher level inpatient hospitalization, yet residential programs reported that they couldn't adequately treat them either because the level of service was too low. So these gaps meant that children cycled through temporary and even unsafe settings while racking up hundreds of episodes. So the recommendations included that DCF assess behavioral health capacity and create performance measures for the adequacy of care. Beyond these 2 top findings, we found a breakdown in providing the required notifications and related data quality problems. So when a child goes missing, there are various statutes and state and DCF policy that require notifications to be sent out to a variety of different parties. Now, we found that these notifications, whether it be to police, to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, to the child's attorney, to guardian ad litems, and to even DCF itself, were either late or undocumented. A recurring obstacle here was the data quality. And so poor and missing data meant we couldn't verify whether legal or procedural timelines were met or if the notifications happened at all. So we recommended that controls be implemented to be sure that these notifications are properly documented and tracked. So Margaret will now go over the remaining findings.
So our next area looks at case oversight and response gaps. So DCF assesses missing from care cases as critical or significant. Critical incidents are more urgent, such as for a child under 13 or a child who needs medication. This risk assessment also informs various notification requirements, including to the police. We found that DCF did not have documented risk assessments in most cases. This affects our ability to see if DCF appropriately assessed the case and also completed notifications timely. We also found a few instances where DCF did not document search efforts. In addition, for most cases, we did not find documentation of a reassessment of the situation as required by policy. Therefore, we do not know if one happened in that case. About a third of missing cases had no evidence DCF tried to determine why the child went missing when the child returned to care. DCF also did not have procedures to address this. And then we found DCF did not have special procedures to address the unique needs of youth who are absent without leave or AWOL. These are cases where DCF knows where the child is or is in communication with the child, but the child is not in an approved placement, which creates unique safety considerations for that child. So we recommend that staff and contractors be trained on how to assess cases as critical or significant, and that DCF track documentation of this assessment. We recommended also that DCF develop controls to ensure staff appropriately document their search for the child, perform reassessments, and determine why the child went missing. We also recommended that DCF develop AWOL-specific guidance to address the unique needs of these children. For the next slide, I'm just going to talk a little bit about human trafficking and how DCF responds to trafficking in these cases. So when a child is missing for more than 72 hours, their social worker must notify the Human Anti-Trafficking Response Team, or HART, within 2 business days. And then a HART consult must occur within 72 hours of the request. HART conducts a consult with the child's social worker to assess the child's risk for trafficking and identify resources to support that child or reduce the risk of being trafficked. HART uses the Child Trafficking Decision Map. This is a tool developed by DCF to assess the child as being at risk, high risk, suspected, or confirmed for trafficking. The tool lists red flags grouped into categories from lower risk indicators to higher risk indicators. The slide contains several examples. For example, if there is sexually explicit material of the child being used to manipulate them, being afraid of an employer or supervisor, having a history of multiple runaway episodes, having association with one or more confirmed traffickers, and if law enforcement has confirmed the child has been trafficked. So those are examples of indicators in the tool. The tool does not necessarily determine that the child experienced trafficking during that missing episode, because the consult might occur while the child is still missing. But it looks more holistically at the child and what DCF knows about the child to assess the risk. So regarding our findings around trafficking practices or response to trafficking practices, we found inconsistent screening for sex trafficking. Over 90% of children who returned to care lacked a documented screening. DCF also lacked procedures to screen all children who return to care for trafficking, as required by federal law. DCF policy only requires the screening for children missing for more than 72 hours. We also found DCF did not consistently document heart consults or the necessary data to calculate the timeliness of these consults. Further, heart liaisons complete these duties voluntarily on top of the responsibilities as DCF social workers. And finally, DCF did not have trafficking-specific performance measures to assess performance of anti-trafficking efforts. We recommended mandatory trafficking screenings for all returning children, improved heart documentation, and the creation of trafficking-specific performance measures. Finally, for our last finding group, the audit noted some smaller procedural and statutory glitches. First, DCF does not have procedures for when NCMEC may release a missing child poster, which may lead to delays in releasing a poster. And then finally, state statute requires DCF to notify the police, but does not include a time frame. It also requires DCF to notify the FBI's National Crime Information Center, but DCF appears to not have the authority to do so, as that is typically law enforcement's responsibility. And so we recommend that DCF develop a procedure for when NCMEC may release missing child posters, and that DCF seek legislation to clarify statute to align with federal law.
Okay, and just to close out, I think just across the many findings and some common themes emerged for us. So certainly there were some documentation gaps that made it hard to verify compliance. The data system just weren't robust enough to properly support the work of the staff. Key procedures were missing or inconsistently applied. There are resource and capacity shortfalls for the most challenging cases. And finally, a theme that cuts across much of the report is this need for prevention and evaluation analysis. There's a lack of a systemic review. It really affects how quickly and effectively the agency can respond, and it underpins some of the other weaknesses that we have here. That concludes our presentation, our run through the findings and recommendations, and we're happy to take any questions.
Oh, thank you all so much for that helpful visual presentation. It's really good for folks to really understand. One thing I just wanted to ask up front was, I know this performance audit is different than an annual sort of financial statement audit. And financial statement audits are done every single year, whether they're in a group of a biennial or triennial sort of audit. This is different. And so the question I have is for folks to understand why we decided to do, or why was a performance audit determined for DCF, because I know you only do a handful of performance audits every year.
It's a very rigorous process on our part to kind of, we're always looking for topics that are topical, that are going to be a meaning to you as legislators. in a way that'll move the dial in some way, a topic of interest. And we really struggle to develop meaningful topics. It takes a lot of work, and it starts off as a concept, and auditors like Scott and create a more of a scope document. And sometimes during that due diligence process, we find out there's really something it's not worth pursuing. So it's and we've talked about this in the context of doing these audits. They're time consuming, as they said, about 2,400 hours for this particular audit, and it's kind of a narrow scope. So that's kind of how we go about doing it. So we're constantly trying to develop topics. We look at what our colleagues are doing around the country. We look at award-winning topics from the National Association of State Legislatures, their program evaluation group, the National State Auditors Association. So that's how we go about looking for topics.
So during the course of your financial audit, do you look at any of these parameters as part of that sort of annual audit procedure so that we can have an understanding of, because this fiscal year was 21, 22, and 23. So we know that our fiscal year ends in June. So this was high audit, COVID time. It covered a large part of different lockdowns and different restrictions, and so it was a difficult time for our young people that were maybe having to learn remotely, and families that were having struggling either with loss of jobs and income. But so it is an extremely difficult time. In terms of follow-up for fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 that just ended a few weeks ago, what sort of follow-up will the auditors do to kind of get an understanding of where we are today?
Are you talking to this specific performance audit?
Either in the form of the performance audit, or if this will be part of the financial statement audit as a follow-up from the recommendations.
Well, let me take the first part. The audits you mostly see are compliance audits. We're required to audit every state agency and every quasi-public agency approximately every 2 years. Sometimes we add an extra year as we struggle, as we too were struggling with the rigors of COVID and our federal responsibilities. That's another element that might inform some of these performance audits. And doing those compliance audits, the auditor may have an area that they come across, or there may be a related finding that'll inform us for a possible performance audit topic. Scott can speak to the process we do follow up on all the performance audits. Scott can speak to that.
Yeah,
process.
we follow up on the performance audit. We usually take about 2 years from the time that the report is published. I mean, often agencies, it takes them a while. I mean, it kind of depends on the complexity of the findings sometimes too, but it takes them a while to be able to address some of these things. And sometimes there's, regulations that need to be had or changed, or like in this case, there's analysis that needs to be done, perhaps planning that needs to be done. So we like to give them a sufficient amount of time to kind of respond, and then we will issue a compliance report at that time for them. And then from there, that's where our part ends.
Got it. There was a bill that I was working on this session that would actually require agencies, if they had sort of findings like this, to have an interim sort of update on where they were in implementing any sort of recommendations. Sadly, it didn't get over the finish line this year, but we'll try again next year. I am not going to monopolize the questions because I'm sure everyone here has lots of questions. So before we hear from the agency, would like to give folks on the committees an opportunity to ask. Representative Paris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for your presentation, and I think it's really helpful for us to kind of frame where we are post-COVID, and also where we are as an agency, or where DCF is rather as an agency. So your last audit of DCF, whether it be compliance, whether it just be, fiscal, that last audit was 3 years ago. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
The last departmental audit we of DCF we released in May of this year for the fiscal years 19, 20, and 21.
Okay, so prior to what was released this year, the audit before that was released when?
I don't have that in front of me, but
Okay.
yeah, we can get that to you.
I'm asking because I'm interested in hearing the common themes between the previous released audit that happened before this year, this calendar year, and where the agency has made corrections and has properly fixed what they've been doing right. Like I want to highlight what they've been doing right in addition to some of their shortcomings based on your audit. So I just wanted to see if there were any findings that you could provide us with. If not, I would appreciate that post this informational session that you would share that with both of our committees.
Thank you, Representative. I
Thank you.
just note all part of our audit process for the departmental audits, the biennial audits, is we have to follow up on every single finding and recommendation. And we've changed the format of our audits in the last couple of years, so you can see that in green or red, or so we do. We just released an audit, I think yesterday, of the paid family leave authority. And they had corrected all 4 of their recommendations from last time and had none this time. So it's all
Perfect.
visible, but we can get you the information and how many repeat recommendations there were.
I appreciate that. And I'm sure if I were to ask DCF the same question when they hit the hot seat, I'm sure they would tell me that they have no issues whatsoever. So I just want to be fair to both offices and agencies. Thank you.
And I would just note we're in the field for the 22, 23, and 24, I believe, fiscal years on the departmental audit. So.
Thank you very much. All right, Representative Carney.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for this audit. It's certainly been very informative. I guess thus far, and I know we're having this discussion today, but have you had any conversations with DCF on any of these recommendations, and have they made any changes yet that you know of?
Well, DCF has responded to these findings within the audit report, and that was as of April of this year. So there are responses there, different responses. We haven't, since the report has been issued in June, we haven't had any conversations with them, but their responses are there.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I did see that, and there was some agreement, some disagreement. I guess, and just with it's, I guess, difficult because this is one part of the agency, but I'm just trying to, I guess, I'm wondering whether this would speak to greater issues at the department and other parts of the department. I'm not sure if you can comment on that, or if you've done audits, a performance audit on this agency in the past. I know prior to me coming to the legislature, there were significant issues at DCF about, 15 years ago. So I don't know if you could speak to any of that.
Well, we've done, obviously we've done departmentals. We also recently did another report in DCF on kinship care. I don't want to comment on too broad an area, but data systems come up a lot, and I know that they're in the process, and we hope to hear more about that. That they're changing out their data systems. That will help. It should help tremendously for helping to track what's going on and being able to measure how well they're doing in certain areas. The resource shortages for high need youth is not unique to what we're speaking to. The State Child Advocate has come out many times to talk about the needs in that area. So some of the things that we have found have underlined, some of the broader issues that exist.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that answer. Thank you again. Thank you for all the hard work you've done for this.
Thank you, Representative Carney. Representative Lanu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for your hard work and diligence on this. I was just wondering if you could just clarify for me, finding 2 in your presentation. Did that consist of did you interview kids that went missing? Did you do that directly, or? Am I misunderstanding it?
We did not interview kids directly. No, we wouldn't do that in this particular case. We looked at the case record, extensive case records. We have a summary of some of those cases in the back of the report, the appendix of the report. But no, we didn't speak to the youth in those cases. But there was there are hundreds of pages of documentation of what had gone on with these children. So that's what we used.
Okay, because what I'm reading here is you're saying some of the high-risk youth, often victims of trafficking or behavioral health needs, couldn't access appropriate placements. The trafficking or behavioral health needs, did that happen when they were missing, or was that what led them into DCF care to begin with?
I'm going to let Margaret answer the details. She's the one who actually did the work in that area.
Sure. I mean, usually a combination. There may have been things. Most of these children had been in care for a little bit of time at this point. But some of it was a continuation of problems going on before entering care. I can't speak because I did not read the entire record for every single child. So I cannot say that that was the case in every single case, but issues before care, but then also during care. Yes.
Okay, so the 6 case studies, and then there was a total of 341 missing episodes. What were the case studies? Do you know how many kids are on each study, or?
It was 6 children total.
Okay, so a case study is the key word for one child.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Do you remember the age ranges and the ranges that they were missing? Those cases you're looking at specifically.
They were 14 through 17. I believe one 14-year-old, one 15-year-old, 2 16-year-olds, and 2 17-year-olds. Do you mean in terms of the length of the episode, or?
Well, I'm curious their age ranges, and I
Yeah.
think
Okay. Yes.
you
So
answered-
14 through 17.
and that leads to my other question. What length of time were they missing within those case studies?
I don't have that information off the top of my head. I can say hours to days. Very, very large range. We can get more information about that if you'd like, but it's a range.
Okay, and again, I'm just making sure I'm wrapping my head around this. There were 6 children in total that went missing a total of 341 times.
Correct.
Okay. Was there any did you notice any kind of common theme with duration and reason? Like the longer the duration was because of reason X, the shorter durations were because of reason Y. Did you see any common themes there?
Do you mean in terms of the length of the episode?
Yeah, let's say, so for example, if there was a child that went missing for, say, 60 days on average, they went missing for 60 days because more often than not, because of whatever reason, a specific reason, compared to a lesser amount of time because of a more common, different reason.
I can't speak to that for sure. That information, like the reason the child went missing, A, it's complex. It's not necessarily one thing or another. B, as we talked about in the reports, it's not recorded like in an aggregatable manner. So we didn't have a way to like look at that in a comprehensive manner. We looked at the case reviews, but I couldn't speak specifically to that.
Okay, all right. And thank you for those answers. And there was a total of 606 different children that went missing at least once during this period of time that you guys were looking at this data. Do you know how many of those 606 kids were recovered and eventually found?
All but one. At the time the data was pulled, there were 2 children who were still missing. One child was found pretty much days after the data was pulled, and then one child is still missing.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Online, we have Senator Perillo.
Madam Chair, I appreciate it. You know, one of the things that was identified in the original remarks and the PowerPoint is in the common themes, which is prevention strategies and evaluation is lacking. There are few jobs in state government that are more difficult, than those at DCF. I always sort of wonder what systems could be put in place to make that easier. So my question is this: if indeed we've identified a lack of prevention strategies and evaluation, you know, did you as auditors identify any specific type of data collection processes that could help the agency, that could help DCF um, better prevent these situations on the front end? Because once you're chasing your tail, once you're reactive all the time, it really is hard to keep up. So, my sense is that the solution, the underlying solution, is prevention. So I'm wondering if there was any evaluation by the auditors about what could be done on the front end and what data could be gathered.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't, I don't want to say we didn't develop a sort of an evaluation scheme for them in this type of case. I think there's literature out there that speaks to some of the strategies that exist and that they could benefit from. But I mean, at first we need to understand the problem, and we don't, like I said, we did an analysis, a rather limited analysis of the data that exists. Just who runs away, where are they more likely to run away from, what are the circumstances under that? So so you begin to see, like, okay, it's teenagers, it's females, it's from congregate care facilities. So then you can begin to sort of target, okay, well, what's going on with those dynamics that we can begin to address. So I mean, you've got to analyze the data, understand the problem a little more, and it's got to go even beyond what we have provided here to begin to come up with prevention strategies. But it's sort of a basic data analysis. What metrics are we trying to do? We're trying to reduce the number of runaways. We're trying to reduce the frequency. We're trying to reduce the duration. Well, who's running away? Where are they running away from? What have been some of the commonalities? Some of that still needs to be worked out and looked at before a plan can be developed. But is there like a set formula for that? We didn't see that.
Oh, thanks, and I appreciate it. I really appreciate that you did some analysis on it. In the course of your work, was there a sense at all or any evidence at all that the agency has started this type of analysis? Was there any indication of that?
I know in their response they said that they were going to begin that type of analysis. But I don't know. I don't know what's happened since then.
Was that an observation that was made in any previous years? Do you know?
An observation of doing the analysis
Of one of your audits.
Oh,
that sort of research was lacking.
No, this is the first time that this office has looked at the missing from care policies and procedures.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Next, Representative Dauphiné is ranking. I'm going to let you go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question is specific to, so it appears that the biggest problem you have is documentation and data, or their lack of. Is that correct? That seems to be the takeaway from this.
Certainly part of it. And then what are you doing with that information?
Right. A strategy. You talked about strategies, right?
Also confirming, what you're required to do certain things under the law. We can't demonstrate that right now.
So you obviously can't implement a strategy if you don't have the data and the documentation or all of it. So would you have any suggestions? I don't know how they're documenting right now. So for example, are they handwriting notes, or they putting in the computer? Are they using voice mechanisms to do that? Is there any recommendations you have about easing that pressure on the staff with regard to documentation and inputting information? Because we know, I think the reports all conclude that there's shortage of staffing. So how can we make that better and easier and more efficient. Did you have anything to say about that?
Well, I mean, we did make suggestions about improving the data systems, and I know, I mean, we were operating under Link. DCF was operating under Link at that time. We were looking at Link data, and now they've moved to a completely different system. So I believe just this month it was implemented. Approximately. So I don't know, and I'm sure we're going to hear about that, what their improvements that they've made. But yeah, anything you can automate, especially tracking data, tracking time. At the time, there were pieces of the requirements that were not tracked at all electronically. They had to do certain things in a certain time frame or what have you. There wouldn't even be a place for a social worker to enter this information of that, aside from the narrative. And that's certainly not an easy thing to try to figure out how well things are working if you've got to go through hundreds of pages of narrative. But there was no like standalone drop down or anything like that for certain things that we're tracking here. So hopefully those things have been improved.
Yeah, I mean, we have so much advanced technology now that you can almost timestamp anything. You can almost talk into your watch. You can, or whatever the phone mechanism is on. So it seems to me like that might be something that would help resolve the struggle that they're having getting documentation down so that we can proceed and get better procedures in place, better strategies. My other comment or maybe it's kind of a question, were you charged at all with looking at the process or policy on how you evaluate and substantiate cases versus unsubstantiated cases? Was there anything done with regard to that?
We did not get into that area at all. Yeah, that would have been a large scope increase at that point. Yeah, no, all these children were in care. All of these children were under DCF care.
And to your knowledge, is that something that's done in past audits?
To determine substantiation.
Yeah, the policy and the procedure that they use to do that and how that's determined and how that can be improved.
I don't believe we've done anything on substantiation in the past. No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Vale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We go back to finding two. He made me think of a few questions, Representative Lanu. And you talked about the gaps in care where inpatient would be too high a level of care,
Right.
but foster placement wasn't high enough level of care. Correct? Was that
You're right.
my understanding?
Yes, or some sort of like residential therapeutic type placement as well. Yes.
Okay. So again, it was just there was no place that offered the adequate amount of care for these particular children. And in your recommendations, it says develop performance measures for adequacy of placements. Do you have recommendations for that, or are you just asking DCF to come up with a plan to better suit kids that fall in that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think we mean, our kids being placed appropriately, whatever they're assessed at, are they being timely placed where they are supposed to be according to their needs and their assessments. We also looked at, we looked broader than that. We looked at the Carillon data, which is the third party administrator for the state for determining placement for children. And in there's reports, of course, of children also who have to go through various levels of care and cannot find the level that they need to do. We reported delays. Children are left in hospitals for periods of time, emergency rooms, because they cannot find the level of care, or the level of care is not available to them. It just undergirds some of the things that we were finding with these 6 cases. So we think there's room for a broader look at how well are we doing in that space. How well are children being placed? Are they being placed appropriate to their needs? And that they need to develop, we think DCF needs to develop some performance measures around that are pretty straightforward.
Okay, so again, it's part of the placement and just picking the right placement.
Right.
Are there gaps in a specific level of care that exists? Do you know what I'm saying? So if someone really needs some high level care or low end care, are there do we have all the different levels of care available and just not placing people properly or going through it? Or are there gaps in the level of care? Does that make sense? Okay.
Based on the case reviews and talking to providers, I would say both.
Okay.
There are definitely kids who there might be an appropriate level of care that already exists, but the wait lists are just so long, they can't get there. There also were children who really were stuck between levels of care where there wasn't much. So like the kids who they didn't meet criteria for inpatient hospitalization, for example. That tends to require fairly, psychiatric symptoms that makes the child a danger to themselves or others. These are children who have very high behavioral health acuity needs, but they're not necessarily directly psychiatric in nature, which means the hospital won't necessarily take them. But the next level of care is the psychiatric residential facility, treatment facility. Did not feel comfortable and safe taking these children. So they're sort of stuck in a place where the next lower available level of care was just not quite high enough, but the highest level of care couldn't take them.
And how is DCF supposed to address that? Or because they're not providing the care, correct? Is it available and we're just not placing them? Like like you made recommendations to place them properly, but if there's a gap in being able to get that placement, are you following my line of question?
Well, the recommendation is, first of all, DCF needs to assess the adequacy of the care that's being provided. As being the top child advocate in the state, we would hope that they would be able to advocate for the need and the necessity for those levels of care. And it may not only be DCF that needs those levels of care. Either children who are part of DCF may not only need those. There may be other state agencies that also could benefit from this. So, they have the capability, we believe, to figure out what they're missing and bring that forward and be able to demonstrate the need for this level of the various levels of care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Marr. I usually.
There you go. Hi, nice to see you. Thank you for the information. Couple of questions. First off, what led to this particular focus? What was the precedent to deciding this was going to be your area of focus when looking at DCF?
There were, I mean, as John was pointing out, we go through a process. We try to look at, we get different sources of information or suggestions from different groups. But, one of the things I think for this specific audit, I mean, we try to also consider vulnerable populations and what's happening with our most vulnerable populations. This could be the elderly, this could be children, that kind of thing. And I think there was a period of time where there were concerns about children running away. We had the reports from the child advocate with the Star Homes going on. There were other, sort of random stories of children running away in some horrible cases. There's been a number of reports or, concern about sex trafficking and what the state is doing in response to that. So, as we take in that information, and we consider sort of the array of, sort of vulnerable and risky areas, it's not just money that we're looking at. We're also looking at, risk to people's lives and what the responsibilities of the various state agencies are. So in review of all of that, we said, well, hey, what's going on with the, children who are running away? Is there something here that we can, kind of find out about more and what's actually going on? So that's sort of how that evolved for us.
Okay. And it's just a button, so don't understand it. Anyway, this was, as we mentioned before, during the height of COVID, right? When there was a lot going on. We know that we had many different focuses on how do we keep people safe? How do we work from home? How, there was a lot going on. I'm wondering if how that affected your team Because you mentioned it did affect your team.
Well, I mean, we like to acknowledge that, that all the agencies, all state agencies were going through some difficult time, and how they operated had to change. I think, I don't want to overemphasize it either, because I mean, by the 23, we're coming out of COVID at this point where, it still exists, of course, and interestingly, the number of episodes are increasing from 21 to 23. So as opposed to the reverse. So there could be other things going on here aside from COVID, that's, that's causing things to happen.
Okay, thank you. And a question, did you have anyone on your team who had any human services or social work background? And I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
Margaret is a licensed social worker.
Oh, good to know. Thank you. Love social workers. I'm
She's
one.
not the only licensed social worker we have other on our staff as well.
Good to know. Thank you. The reason I ask that is because we know that the impact of COVID on children was particularly difficult, and we're still seeing the tag-on effects. So yes, the end of June 2023, we were coming out of COVID, but we were seeing the effects of that significantly. So I'm glad to know that we had a social work perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I know many folks in different environments I talk to today still see they're having the effects of COVID because, we're talking about young people who were at the time that they were experiencing the lockdowns and the other restrictions, their brains were developing. They had no prefrontal cortex to be able to process some of the things that were happening. And it's only as that brain is processing it and the experiences that we're seeing follow on trauma. And I think that, we should recognize that, yes, maybe in 23, we're past the sort of heat of it, but that's the heat of it for all of us in the room that have developed prefrontal cortexes. We're not talking about children. So I think, your point was extremely valid, Senator. So thank you for making that. Sorry to make that comment. And Representative Wheelander.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to sort of jump on that, since we have this opportunity, one of the things that I know was noted during the pandemic was a drop in reporting through DCF and through our school systems because there were not as many children in front of teachers, social workers, caseworkers, and that jumped back when the regular habits of attending school or whatnot were restarted, so to speak, in the 23 era or 23 year. Okay, so during this report, was any conversation with any caseworkers actually had to discuss this process?
Yeah, we had extensive discussions with caseworkers in different regions, as well as supervisors as well.
Within the state?
Yeah, and we also, I mean, we spoke to stakeholders. We speak to a number of people throughout the course of the event.
Okay. And I'm wondering, because I know that our good ranking member of Children's also mentioned this, that staffing has been a concern for a long time. And was staffing looked at specifically in this report when we're looking at access to care, in the number of social workers that we might have, the caseloads that they have, and also I'm wondering about the potential increase over these years of using third-party contractors and whether or not that also might have had an impact. Was that part of the evaluation?
That was a little broader than, as far as, staffing patterns and things like that. We did not look at contractors and staffing patterns. I mean, we will point out too that, the DCF staff that we spoke to, were, incredibly dedicated. The lower level frontline staff people, put in a tremendous effort. So, this is not to impugn frontline staff in DCF at all. We're talking about larger systems typically that are not working maybe as appropriately as they should. And their efforts to look for children, some are, nearly heroic that they go to try to find children. So, don't want to, in our discussions with them, there's a lot of incredibly dedicated staff.
I appreciate you saying that because I think when you're reading the report, it doesn't actually come across that way. Looking at pages 10 and 15 and looking at the notes of effect and cause, it's actually reads rather insulting to the people who are doing that. And that's my opinion. I haven't talked with anyone else about that. That it is by not fully understanding and assessing missing from care cases, the department squanders an opportunity to implement strategies to prevent children from going missing from care. I know through my 5-6 years now on that committee that they are actively working on trying to prevent children from leaving. These are children with high acuity care needs, and I want to just make sure that we are really understanding that DCF, and again on page 15, did not sufficiently reinvest in the full continuum behavioral care. That there's not sufficient capacity. That's true. There is not sufficient capacity in all levels of care. I know though that DCF agency, the Department of Public Health, behavioral health advocates, the Office of the Child Advocate, almost everyone I know has advocated for increased funding for those middle grounds where a lot of those kids are falling through the gaps, where they are not able to qualify for psychiatric care, but we don't have the capacity. And so trying to do the best we can is going to result in these things. And when we're looking at just data points, I worry because children in care are not data points. And when we are looking at a report that is implying potentially that we found these 6 children all experienced sex trafficking, victimization, or juvenile justice system involvement, but you are unable to say whether or not that happened before, during, potentially both, because all of the cases were not read in their entirety. That is a concern because the narrative, while I know is difficult to get through, that is really important. And we're talking about caseworkers who are going to be sitting down and having conversations with children and then recording that. And if I'm misunderstanding how it's being presented, please correct me. But I do feel like when we are looking at a report like this, it does need to take that into consideration. And my last point, I'm sorry, I'm going on a bit, is looking at the future audits and the potential, looking, as DCF implements another new data system for collection. And we do need to rectify the communication aspect of who is going to be reporting to NCMEC, who is going to be going to FBI, who's, what policies do we follow? That is entirely needs to be updated. Will the future audits also take into consideration potential federal changes where, like what we know now, that federal agents that were previously assigned to child online abuse and sex trafficking and other child-based concerns have now been reassigned to different areas of focus? Will that be taken into consideration for how the reporting back and forth goes in communication? Is that something that goes on in your department?
Well,
in evaluation, I should say?
yeah, I mean, so our next step would be to look at the compliance with this, and certainly we're going to consider anything that DCF says there's anything going on in the environment that's going to impact their ability to do their job or to prevent sex trafficking and what have you. So yeah, of course we consider all those factors when we look at it.
Okay.
And I don't want to suggest, I mean, we did provide detail on the appendix of the youth. And I think if you read through them, I mean, many of them, if not most of them, did have sex trafficking after when they ran away. we can't, I don't know if we just don't have necessarily everything that happened before a certain point in time is
Mhm.
what we mean, but there is certainly detailed of kids being sex trafficked while they're in DCF care or while they're run away. So I don't want to make it sound like there was nothing going on there or we couldn't tell when it was.
Mhm.
There's a considerable detail in the appendix on those cases.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, birthday girl. Next, Representative Paris for the second time.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you for being much kinder to me than the appropriations chairs. I appreciate that greatly. Just one or two quick questions around the data, your fourth finding 4 on page 19, and this will lead, I think, into the overall question that I'll have afterwards. So the data quality concerns prevent verification of compliance with police notification requirements, and here with the condition, under the condition, you state the DCF did not sufficiently document police notifications to show evidence of compliance with state and federal laws, and in some instances, the agency did not promptly report critical incidents. But in the down in the appendix, in the subnotes, you also note that you use the date and time the child went missing from care to test for compliance instead of the date and time that caregiver notified DCF because of DCF's aggregated report. And that does not include that the caregiver notified DCF. What's actually timely about this particular this finding is that for the last couple of weeks, I've been notified by a family. I know many of my colleagues have been notified by a family for a child that has gone missing and that they had a fear this child was actually being trafficked. And that's all the information I'll simply give because I don't want to put the child at risk or the family at risk. But what was interesting is that when I asked the advocate on behalf of the child and the child's family, do you have any idea where the child might be? The answer from that advocate was, well, they might be in Hartford, or they might be in New Britain, or they might be, let's say, in Washington Depot. They might be in Torrington. They could be anywhere. The issue where I think DCF where it might be unfair for the agency is that the agency has to find, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, they have to find um, the correct term, and I'm missing out on the correct term, but they have to find someone within the agency a caseworker essentially, to get all the information, notify police. Police, from my understanding, have said to some of the caregivers or some of the caseworkers, and then also the families, that you have to wait 48 hours or you have to wait to a certain time limit. Well, I don't think the agency should be at fault for that if they're doing their part in trying to report it, and police jurisdictions are simply saying that we have to wait for a certain number of time, and by that time the child could be anywhere. So in closing, my question is, are there better standards that other states are doing in terms of the timeliness of how they're reporting this regarding the child, in order to, one, find the child, place the child back with their caregiver, and also coordinate with other departments of children and families across the country?
Well, there's a lot, there's a lot there to unpack. Yeah, I mean, first of all, for the reporting, I mean, DCF is recording when someone has to call the police at a certain point, given if certain critical things are occurring, if the child falls into a certain category, even if you're calling the police of the town in which the child lives, there's that requirement is at least met minimally. And so that's at least what we were looking for. The complication of where they are and all that kind of stuff, that's a whole other issue that DCF deals with as well, and we acknowledge that. As to whether other states deal better with that, I don't think we have anything on that. And part of the problem is, even if the police aren't taking which they shouldn't, that this shouldn't be occurring. They shouldn't be waiting 48 hours to take in a report on a child. But we've heard that too, that some people have said that. But at least the recording of it, we would at least see in the record that DCF called the police. It doesn't, for the purposes of meeting that requirement, it wouldn't matter that the police said we don't do anything 40 hours. We would expect them to see call back at a particular time or whatever that would happen. But we know there have been some states who have used best practices of having that requiring the agency to have an MOU with every single police department. We looked at some of that and saying that seems a little unwieldy, given all the number of police departments, the number of regions that DCF has, and that there would be some kind of reporting requirement, and then there would be, a check on accountability for that seems like a system overlay that might be a little more complicated than, it wouldn't solve the problem. I don't think. So that's what we've seen in that area.
And my last comment, look, I greatly respect the work that you all have put into this. And I think that the findings are certainly helpful in terms of us trying to pivot forward and finding solutions. I think what my concern will be my concern is right now as it stands is that working with our Republican colleagues, certainly working with our Democratic colleagues and across committees, it is important for the public to know that DCF, and for that matter, local police jurisdictions are only doing what we allow them to do via the law. So it is incumbent upon us. It's not DCF is doing. I've gone through this process with the commissioner and her staff with missing children. And again, this has been over the last 2 weeks. So this is very fresh. They're doing everything that they possibly can. The police they're doing what they are allowed to do. But then the families and the children are the only ones that are at further risk. And that's my concern, is that there's not a more robust and substantive apparatus and outreach for us to get our children back sooner. I think that the timing of when we actually can report a child missing should be much shorter. I think that we need to have a more jurisdiction given and granted to DCF and certainly with the police departments to ensure that they come back quicker. But I asked that question because I just want it on the record that we cannot place the blame on the feet or at the feet of the agency, that we have to be able to know that that is a legislative process from our end too. Thank you so much.
I have Rep. Lanu for the second time, and then you, and then I have a bunch of questions still. Representative Lanu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of other questions. I just want to be clear. I'm trying to quantify the numbers here a little bit. If I'm looking at this correctly, 97% of the cases involve 13 to 17-year-olds. Am I understanding that correctly?
Hold on.
Okay, so if I'm doing my math right, so roughly 18 kids in total, 18 children were missing for 101 days. I'm sorry, 18 kids were under the age of 13 that were missing. That's in that 606 population.
Right.
Yeah, was it?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, all right. And then 2% of the kids in total were missing for 101 days or more. Is that also correct? Okay, so if I'm doing it,
Yes, 200%. You're right. Yep.
is that correct?
Yep.
Yes, okay. So that's roughly 12 kids were missing for 101 days or more. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Right.
Okay, that's all. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Just to follow up, that's not cumulative days. Those are individual days that are missing, just for the avoidance of doubt.
most kids are missing for a day or less.
Yeah.
Right. Most kids are missing for a
Okay.
day or less. But
I was just confused when you said 101 days. It was making me think that they were gone for a third of a year
Right, so
consistently, like
12, but I just want to be able to make sure I'm clear. 12 kids were missing for a period of 101 days or longer, correct?
Right.
Okay, all right,
but not cumulatively is what he's saying.
right.
Not consecutively, sorry. That's probably a
Okay,
better.
so it's not 101 days straight? It's not. Okay,
yes. Yeah. Yeah. 70% of kids are missing from 0 to 1 days. 18% were missing from 2 to 7 days. 7% were missing from 8. Yeah, these are individual episodes.
okay, so for one episode, I apologize. I just want to make sure we're crystal clear on this. For one episode,
Right.
meaning a kid missing. There's a kid missing for at least 100 days or more
Yes,
at one time.
yes.
And there's 12 kids within this 3-year period that was missing for at least 100 days or more at one time.
Yes.
This is based on episodes, so it's of the 3,636
Right,
episodes.
right. 3,000 episodes.
So.
So it's not
Well-
consecutive days it is consecutive days, because I'm a little confused, because my understanding was there were several episodes, maybe lasting a few days here and a few days there. And when you add them all up, it was more than 101 days. That was my understanding from the report.
Right, 70% of children missing from care for 1 day or less. So it's the number of children. Right.
So maybe I can break it down like this, because I just want to make sure we're understanding this right. One
Oh, it was episodes. Okay. It was episodes. I'm sorry. It's episodes.
sorry, so let me try to ask this again. One child, right?
Yep.
That's missing for over 100 days straight.
Correct.
That's considered an episode
Right.
of 100 or more straight days. And there were 12 kids that were missing for at least 100 straight days each,
Yes, there's
or longer. Okay, so the straight, okay,
So it's consecutive.
right.
consecutive days.
Okay.
So they were gone. Nobody knew where they were for over 100 days.
They were missing. Yes, they were missing for that time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Marr, did you have another question? Sorry.
I did. I just want to go back again to the topic of the audit, because from what I understand, previous audits did not address this particular issue. And I recognize that this is not a financial audit per se. I'm just curious why, I mean, it feels to me, I'm going to say this, that this is actually a newsworthy decision rather than taking a look at the internal workings of DCF and how they are staffed, the audit of the functioning of the agency, many other aspects that you all know because you do audits, I don't. But I'm surprised at the focus, the singular focus here, rather than a more comprehensive look, since we know that these audits do not happen frequently. And this is not something I don't remember. The good chair yesterday in a conversation was telling me what the audits were previously. So I'm just really curious about why this was the decision when there are so many certainly worthy components of looking at DCF as a total.
Well, I'll answer that. The audits you generally see in your inbox are departmental audits, and those audits often point out issues of lack of staffing or people that have gone that no longer conduct a certain role. So that's normal in the terms of those compliance audits, because we look at whether agencies are following the law, whether they're following the regulations, whether they're following a state policy. This is so narrow precisely for the reason that this audit took 2,400 hours to complete. We have to, the idea of these performance audits to see our a goal of looking at efficiency and effectiveness and how to improve programs. It's not a compliance audit. Our compliance audits look at whether you had the adequate medical certificates as an employer, those kinds of issues, more operational issues. This is, hopefully a tool to see how this area that DCF operates, how it's working, and ways to improve it. And that's the goal. We have, the history of this is prior to 2017, our office was not doing performance audits. And it was something we always wanted to get back into doing. And the opportunity came along when program review and investigations, they closed the office, and the 5 most senior employees from that agency chose to come work with us, and it was a golden opportunity to resume this work. But because we only had those 5 people are now 8 people. And as an agency with a lot of accountants, we budget for our audits, and we budget for the amount of hours that an employee can work. So that gives us, those 8 people really roughly have 12,000 hours in a year. A lot of that is not, this took 2,400 hours. A lot of it is the due diligence that goes into planning these. We vet a bunch of topics, and the time and effort and the planning that goes into it is extensive. And that's why we look at these very, narrower issues. An example is 1 years ago that came to us from the legislature regarding the non-emergency medical transportation with the Department of Social Services. And I think that was one of our most successful reports that we did, but it was a couple of representatives came to us with the idea. And as a result of that audit, we had over 50 recommendations, and most of them were implemented within 6 months. And we're not hearing complaints because we have a whistleblower unit. We're not hearing complaints. Legislators are not hearing complaints. We were hearing complaints from the providers, from the taxi cab companies, and the patients, and we're not hearing them anymore. So that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I just have a couple more questions. I think everyone's asked a lot, but unfortunately, you're dealing with former auditor. So I'm going to have questions regarding audit objectives, because I thought people weren't going to necessarily ask those. So as an auditor, we think about different audit objectives. The ones that I think about is completeness and accuracy, as well as, efficiency, as well as effectiveness. But really, when I think of this sort of population, I was hoping to get an understanding from you how you kind of came up with the satisfying the objective of completeness in terms of the populations that you have tested during the procedures, because we go through and we hear about some of the different things, and we talk about there were X number of kids that were in this environment. How did you determine that that was the right number and there wasn't more children that could have been not part of this population?
As far as, well, I mean, first,
Just satisfying the objective of completeness
Completeness?
in the populations.
so we looked at there's a finite population. There's a 606 kids with the 3,700 episodes. So that was our universe, right? That was our universe to look at. So we were able to, for certain compliance issues with, did they notify, were notifications sent out, for certain things, we were able to use the entire universe because DCF had data related to what they did in those things. So that was satisfied. The smallest population that we used was the 6, of course, and we weighed that against how much time that there was. Now we took a sample of 57 cases, but when we found that there was this shortfall in the services, and as we went through the cases, we believed through professional judgment that 6 was enough. If we continued on, and we read through all of the cases, we didn't document the service need for every one of those cases. So we already had a good feeling of that there were more cases that were involved. We stopped at 6 for that particular case just because of the timing, and we felt that it was appropriate. Now, again, with that particular finding, we also married that with the Carillon data, which looked at a broader, the broader DCF population. And, so the question is, so do we have enough to say that there's a shortfall in DCF's array of services? So we looked at that Carillon data and said, there are other cases out here, even outside of missing from care children who are not receiving the appropriate care. we also married that with, there are other reports. The state's, the child advocate has reported on this numerous times about the, so when you begin to, within our work papers, we don't necessarily report everything that we're doing, but when you build upon all of that, you you do use the work of others that they're reliable, you have other sources of data, then we feel that's complete. There's enough for us to report there. We feel solid enough about that in that particular case.
Got it. And so then that would also satisfy the accuracy objective as well. If you are going and digging into those files, looking at other sort of substantiating documents,
Yeah.
maybe from the judiciary system or educational system. Is that correct?
Right. And we're looking for, yeah, we're also looking for, we're looking at discussions that they're having, that the staff are having, DCF staff are having with others. We're looking at, are they interacting with the police? Are they interacting with, you know, how are they interacting with the foster parents? You know, and, you know, who's being notified? You know, we're checking on all of those things based on the case record in those 57 cases.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And in terms of like internal control procedures for a performance audit, what sort of internal control procedures are you doing to ensure that maybe if a caseworker is reporting on something, that they're reporting it up the chain properly and that those sort of notifications are happening? Is there any sort of overall checks by some of the senior staff to ensure that we have accurate data?
When you say internal controls, do you mean for our internal?
No, internal controls of DCF.
Internal
So,
controls of DCF
yeah.
to ensure that the data are correct and things like that. Yeah, we do consider that, and we consider we also tested the data. This is in part of the data inaccuracy that we talk about, right? I mean, we vetted some of that data, we cleansed some of that data ourselves. Now, every time we have to, you know, if we have to, you know, if we have to manipulate the data in a way, we're keeping track of the things that are wrong with the data at the same time. So then we're asking questions about that to DCF. And so that's where that finding comes from. We are checking what their kind of control that they had there, and how, you know, obviously things are not working the way that they should be because the data are not being recorded, and some of the data that is being recorded is not being recorded accurately.
Okay. So in summary, what I read from your whole audit, to summarize, is DCF followed the laws and the regulations of the state of Connecticut and the federal laws. Where we found shortfalls was in the sort of operational aspects of it. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, I mean, we can't verify that they're following the law in all cases.
But in terms of the items that you studied, they were following the laws, the federal laws, the state of Connecticut laws. There may have been some opportunity for us as legislators to maybe clarify some of these things. I know Representative Wiellander sits as chair on the Regs Review Committee, and I know this is something that she'll probably be hearing about going forward in terms of the regulations. But in terms of following the laws of the state, I didn't gather any instance where DCF wasn't following the laws. It was more of operational, some of the documentation, some of the follow-up, some of the things were not properly done, probably because within the laws of the state, within the laws of the feds, there is not that much detail to indicate that certain things need to be done a certain way. Am I reading that right?
Well, we couldn't always verify what they were doing. You know, there are laws and policies and procedures out there. We couldn't always verify that what they were doing followed the necessary procedures or the law, especially in the case of screening for sex trafficking. There's a federal law that requires that all children be screened for sex trafficking. DCF is not doing that. They were doing it after 72 hours, according to their policies and procedures, or that's their policy and procedure. And we couldn't necessarily document that that was happening in every single case.
So you're saying that the federal law says that in every single instance, regardless of the period of time, it needs to be done, or is the federal law not clear?
That's well, that's what the law says. What practice they will accept, I don't know, but
Okay.
we were following what the law had said.
Okay, got it. I think we are good from you all. If you can stick around, if you don't mind. I know it's getting a little later than folks were thinking. But
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I have one question if I can.
I'm so sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Sorry about that. I didn't have it. I just thought if I can ask, I just had one question. Hopefully it'll be brief.
Please go on.
Oh, great. Thank you. I wanted to just had a question about the trafficking analysis. What are some of the examples of trafficking specific performance measures? And if you let me know, do other agencies have those in place? What are they? And right, who has implemented them? That's what I just wanted to know more about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we had anything specific, in mind. I mean, I think in general, when if you're not measuring, you're not managing well. And what we were looking for here is something, okay, here are the children who come in who have been trafficked. Here's our goals that we have around these children and how to protect them or help to prevent that it's not going to happen again, or they need therapy, or there's a plan of action around these children. Have like plans of, how many plans of action have been created? What has the success of that been? Has trafficking been reduced in this population? Things along those lines that, basic sort of evaluative outcomes we would be looking for.
And is the case that other agencies have these metrics in place already in sort of a comparative context?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I think that is good. We'll try that again. Thank you to your team, John, and everybody that works so hard. These performance audits are very robust because they're, as you highlighted, this isn't a standard financial statement audit. So you're looking at things a little bit differently, and appreciate the work that's done here, because I do think that your work does have the effect that gets us thinking about how laws might need to change going forward and how we can do better as a state government. So thank you so much. Next, we'll have DCF, and thank you for your patience. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Lovely to see you up there. Appreciate your patience during this hearing that's been a little longer so far, but really keen to hear from you all. I'm just going to ask, when you do talk, if you could introduce yourself, and so everyone at home knows exactly who's talking and what your role within the agency is.
So good. I guess it's evening right about now, and happy birthday to Rep. Welander. This is how you like to spend your birthday. And I thank you for the conversation, and I will have my team as they're speaking. Do you want them to introduce themselves now, or do you want to wait until how do you want to do this?
Why don't we just go ahead and introduce everybody all at
Absolutely.
front, so then we don't have to remember later.
Okay. So I'm Jody Hill Lilly, Commissioner, for a short period of time.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Vinny Russo. I'm Chief of Government Relations and Policy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tina Jefferson, Deputy Commissioner of Child Protective Services.
Good evening, everybody. Susan Hamilton, General Counsel of DCF.
Hi, I'm Frank Gregory. I'm Administrator of Behavioral Health Community Services.
Thank you. Commissioner, I was just thinking that it might be best for you to start with kind of just some opening remarks and what you all are thinking in your response to the sort of audit and how it went on your side.
Excellent. Again, good evening, distinguished members of the Government Oversight and Children's Committee. I am, as I said, Jody Hill-Lilly, the Commissioner of the Department of Children and Families, and I'm happy to be here before you to discuss the findings of the state auditors in their missing from care audit. This will be the last time that I will appear before the legislator in my role as commissioner, given my pending retirement in a few days. And it has been an absolute pleasure to serve in this capacity with such honorable, and I mean this genuinely, honorable public servants in the General Assembly. I just want to pause and say that to you. I will bring my experiences to the national stage in my new role as Director of Child Wellbeing for the Doris Duke Foundation. So I want to thank the committee members and the auditors even for giving us this opportunity to address our mission from care practices and provide some important context. Much of what has been discussed today, so I really appreciate the nature of the discussion. And that is to reiterate that the state audit was covered 3 fiscal years ending June 30th, 2021, 2022, and 2023, which coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic, a time of unprecedented strain on our country and in the world, and especially on our young people who face a deep sense of isolation and loneliness. It is important to note that since that time, our department has updated its policies. So I appreciate the questioning that was asked about what has been happening recently. As a result of a year-long collaboration with the federal authorities to address gaps in the department's missing from care response and documentation. So Connecticut, along with many other jurisdictions, were going through this exercise of updating its policies. Early last year and prior to receiving the audit findings, DCF began working with the Administration for Children and Families to on a national level to resolve these documentation issues, which have been articulated very well. DCF takes seriously all AWOL and runaways, i.e. missing from care, episodes of youth in the department's care and custody. Our response includes a child and family specific supports to our youth and our caregivers as we make every effort to stabilize the youth who presents with challenging and traumatic behaviors exacerbated by the pandemic as articulated. Our response is also quick, it's thorough, and when children leave their placements, and extensive efforts are made with the assistance of families, the foster families, congregate care providers, law enforcement, and the child's attorney who we engage regularly, and others who may be aware of the child's whereabouts to locate them. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page, and it isn't really critical to clarify language. So missing from care is almost like it's a federal term. It's an umbrella term that is used, and the term on its face can be misleading. To clarify, DCF uses AWOL underneath that, which I'll explain in a minute, and runaway. So missing from care is the umbrella, and then AWOL and runaway are the two categories that we talk about. Nuances between the two terms are as follows. So AWOL, which is absent without official leave, is defined as a youth that left a placement, but DCF knows where the youth is and is is in communication with that youth. The child may have left the residence without permission or may not have returned from at a predetermined time from school or work or an event. This represents the overwhelming majority of the incidents that we experience in DCF. It is also important to note that many children go AWOL for very short periods of time, but return to the placement. However, the episode is still counted. That's how we got to 3,000 plus episodes. But the person could have been gone for 20 minutes and come back. That still counts as an episode. In the therapeutic world, it's not uncommon for children who are particularly in placement to exercise their control by going AWOL, since they are not able to control other circumstances in their life. Runaway means that a child has left a placement and we do not know where the exact whereabouts of that child. Yet we are actively seeking to locate the youth with the assistance of family members, friends, law enforcement, and other contacts. This is less common. In the 3-year span of the audit, only 2 youth, as was noted, were classified as runaway. And one of those youths is accounted for now since the audit findings, and the other one is still at large. And we are working constantly with FBI, state and local police, along with their families, to locate her. At this time, it is believed that she is in her hometown where she grew up. With regards to the state auditor's finding, it's important to emphasize that a small number of youth are accounted for a disproportionate share of missing from care episodes. In the report, there were approximately, as noted before, over 600 youth, 606, I think was said a minute ago, that accounted for 3,736 episodes. One child, and I think this may be some of the confusion from before, one child went missing 100 times. One child went missing 100 times over that period of time. Additionally, 56 children went missing 16 times, making up more than 51% of the episodes. So one child can run multiple times, and each time that child runs, it's an episode. And that's how we got to the 3,000. In contrast, 248 of those children went missing only once, accounting for 7% of the episodes. And also 70% of the children who went missing from care went missing for a day or less. So these are generally short. In fiscal year 2021 and 2022, during that time frame of the audit, there were 170 of the 3,400 kids in care went AWOL or ran away. So again, you're talking about a smaller number. We're concerned about them, those kids, and every time that they run, it does represent a smaller number of kids that just have high acuity. We looked at similar data in other states. In 2023, the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NECMEC, as we call it, handled 478 cases of missing children. So comparatively speaking, Massachusetts had 893 kids, Rhode Island had 478 kids, Nevada had 300 kids, Connecticut had 291 children that were missing from care. While foster families and providers had been notifying law enforcement, this is one of those policy changes, particularly as it relates to Connecticut, where it was identified as a problem and we did have to fix it. Providers would be the ones notifying law enforcement about a youth who went AWOL or ran away. The federal law requires DCF to make that notification. And so we had to shift our policy. If you're looking for something where we notice, oh, we were doing something completely wrong, that was it. We would allow caregivers to make the notification for the police, but now we had to come in compliance with the federal government that we were the ones making the calls. So that was, you asked that question earlier, and I just want to make sure I emphasize that. The policy division reviewed and consolidated existing documentation practices across division, ensuring compliance with the federal guidance in accordance with ACF. This updated practice, finalized on May 1st, 2025, clarifies responsibility for reporting and enhances the department's efforts to detect and prevent trafficking of youth in its care and custody. It's important to state that while documentation certainly could have been better maintained in our system, the policies and practice guides updates provide clear guidance on that. But the follow-up of kids missing from care, especially for kids who are missing for longer periods and who might be subject to trafficking, has always occurred. So to your point earlier, we're dealing with a documentation issue, not a lack of follow-through regarding the care of the children. This report again highlights the acuity of the youth in DCF's care and custody, as well as the difficulty in providing services given the intergenerational trauma and other circumstances they face, many of which are spelled out in the findings of the auditor's report. For example, research has identified children who are female, LGBTQ, teenagers who are placed in congregate care, and other who have a history of sex trafficking, placement instability, and previous episodes of runaway are more likely to run from care. Trafficking service providers can benefit from additional resources, and we are beyond pleased that Love 146, one of the few trafficking service providers, received $500,000 in fiscal year 2026 and 2027. Thank you to the legislature for that, to enhance their services. We also work extensively with multidisciplinary teams to assess and evaluate children who have been potentially trafficked. Those teams include several critical partners, including state and federal law enforcement, to ensure the well-being of the victim and to make every effort to apprehend the perpetrator. It is imperative to note that these teams have been and continue to be instrumental to children and youth at risk of trafficking, and their work was not significantly addressed in the audit report. There was a missed opportunity to talk about the holistic approach to our interventions with human trafficking victims. Protective factors. You talk about how do we prevent this? How do we figure out how to be proactive? Well, protective factors include kinship care placements. Kids who are with their families are running less. Placement with siblings, when they're placed with siblings, they run less. Child-centered planning and strong adult support. At the time of the audit, DCF had reduced the number of children in care and custody by approximately 30% since 2019. Increased kinship care to almost 50%. So almost 50% of our kids that are in care are with relatives. And that in and of itself is a protective factor, particularly for kids that are under the age of 18. And while the data on missing children is limited due to inconsistent definitions and research methods, a 2010 national analysis found that around 30% of youth aged 12 and older in foster care had run at some point. So this is unfortunately a commonplace where kids run. A 2013 study found that older children in care are 2.5 times likely to run away from their peers outside of the child welfare system. Many of the youth that go AWOL are older adolescents who have been placed with DCF for the first time after an emergency stay or time in a detention center. These youth often have not been known to DCF, and they are not in our care and custody due to abuse or neglect, but because their parents are unwilling or unable to care for them due to their behaviors. And it is increasingly difficult to find supports and services to treat their underlying trauma, especially when many of them choose not to engage in treatment. It is really hard to get kids who are running to sit down and engage in treatment. And I can say with a great degree of confidence that many of our service providers, including our SoulNets, do a really good job at trying to engage the children to get them to get involved with treatment so they don't run. And I had the occasion to talk to you. You mentioned this case example that you talked about out of nowhere just the other day. Somebody that I know really well came to me and said, I don't know what to do. My daughter is being trafficked. This is somebody who is a highly regarded professional in the community. Kids going to school with college, but she has an 18-year-old in her home
that won't stay home and is bragging about being trafficked. And so I have to, this is happening in every households that look like mine and yours. We have ourselves an epidemic here. And I appreciate this coming to the attention of all of us so that we can wrap our arms around these youth. Older youth in situations like this feel abandoned, and increasingly it's hard to find supports and services to treat their underlying trauma. As I said, the department continues to expand its service array and work with those children to address the needs to prevent the destructive behaviors like running away from their placements. It's critical to emphasize that the department's foster homes, specialized trauma-informed treatment assessment, the STAR homes with the 2 T's, with the added treatment, thank you. The psychiatric residential facilities, PRTFs, residential treatment centers, group homes are all unlocked. We do not have locked facilities. I repeat, we do not have locked facilities. They are open settings. Staff and foster care providers do not have the right to physically restrain a youth from leaving the facilities or foster home. We cannot stop them. Most youth residing in those settings still attend community schools, behavioral health appointments, hold jobs, participate in extracurricular activities such as athletics and volunteering, and they often go AWOL after participating in some of those events. The department's Solnet South Hospital is a secure adolescent psychiatric hospital facility. Like all psychiatric hospitals in the state, they are secure because the youth who are placed, as evidenced by the testimony a minute ago, have severe mental health disorders and are usually under a court order or deemed dangerous to themselves. That is the only locked facility that we have, but there's a clinical criteria to be placed there. Since 2021 through 2023, DCF has expanded and strengthened our service delivery system to better support at youth risk. Just to name a few, we launched the 3 community programs, the urgent crisis centers. You talk about prevention things that we could do. Like since then, we have the urgent crisis centers. We have the expansion of the mobile crisis intervention centers, which we know we have to secure some funding there. We also have implemented an emergency subacute crisis stabilization program in Hartford. And with a second site under the development in Norwich. So you talk about those gaps. We had assessed there to be some gaps, and we're trying our hardest to fill them in, and those programs are just getting up and running. Additionally, the department introduced a new care model called the Intensive Treatment and Transition Center, which will help to stabilize youth and support them from disrupting from their current treatment center. DCF continues to collaborate with group care providers, the STAR homes, the therapeutic group homes, and residential treatment facilities to enhance staff skills to the point that was raised earlier, and youth engagement, crisis de-escalation, transition coordination, and human trafficking, all critical to reducing the risk of youth going AWOL. Targeted funding has also been provided to STAR homes to improve the physical settings, security measures, trying to put security cameras all around, and to deter and respond to AWOL. In closing, and as a parting gift for my 37 years of service at the Department of Children and Families, I urge you to approach this challenge of children missing from care, not solely as a DCF issue, but one that reflects a broader systemic reality. The shadow pandemic, as I like to call it, has caused youth to carry deep, unresolved trauma while families themselves are fragile. We are seeing young people with co-occurring disorders, including mental health, substance use issues, as well as developmental disorders. Combined with juvenile justice reforms that limit incarceration, which I agree with that wholeheartedly, We shouldn't be locking the kids up, but we do have limitations when they're not locked up. You combine that with a shortage of foster homes. We're always looking for foster homes. You too can be a foster parent. I always have to say that message. And an increase in financial disincentives, including skyrocketing insurance rates for providers. These complex needs are surfacing in ways that no single system alone can resolve. We need collective responsibility across and a cross-system approach, one that fosters 360 accountability, DCF included, instead of one that blames one system over the other, so that we can better understand and support children and families now, and particularly in the future, given the shifts in federal policies and practices that will inevitably impact the level of support available to them. This type of collaboration is needed now more than ever. And I thank you for your patience in listening to my final testimony before you all.
Well, Commissioner, I can't believe you've been with the agency for 37 years. You must have been 12 when you started. 11. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Helping your seniors then. But thank you so much. You've, over the years since I've been in the legislature, you know, your work and the work of the agency has been phenomenal. And it is probably one of the hardest working agencies that we have. And I don't say that lightly because we have a lot of hardworking agencies, but it is a challenging population that you're dealing with. And also, just as we have all talked about, past 5 years have been extremely challenging. And it goes without saying that, you know, you will be very, very missed. So thank you so much. I know a lot of people probably have questions, but I do want to also kind of ask if you all are tracking some of the data and the outside of the report to future periods. And if you could just spend a minute maybe sharing with us, you know, how things have looked. And I understand it's not audited by the auditors, but in terms of some of the graphs that we saw, particularly around the finding one, you know, where are we now in fiscal year 24 and where are we in fiscal year 25, and some of the sort of metrics that you've kind of been highlighted in that one?
So I'll get my team ready to respond, but I will say it was mentioned in the previous testimony by the auditors that we did launch our new CT Kind system. And I will tell you that the reason the system had not been launched in 20 years is that everyone, including me, we were afraid that the system would, you know, make it harder, especially initially. It's just hard to launch a new computer system. We launched it. It's got its difficulties and its challenges that we're working through. But the very first report that we saw in the system was this one. And so so we're looking at tracking that, having a better capability to produce those reports as articulated. And so I think going forward, you're going to see something different in terms of our ability to collect that data, upload it. Once we get the system completely running, I mean, I think we're 3 weeks, not 2.5 weeks in. I mean, it launched August 7th. So, but we took as a team, all in the room, looked at this report. And so it has great promise. And in the future, you will see a difference in terms of our ability to collect data. Yep.
So what we're doing in addition as a workaround is we're making sure that there's collaboration between our CQI, Continuous Quality Improvement Division, and my division, the Child Protective Services Division, so that we are tracking hand count, tracking our youth missing from care, and making sure that we're staying on top of that population. We've also increased communication and collaboration with our behavioral health division, who has a newly hired director of human trafficking, and increased collaboration with NCMEC. And so I now join those meetings along with our new director of human trafficking, along with the 3 chiefs of child protective services, and the reports that we used to get from them monthly, we now get from them weekly. And then what we do is our chiefs of child welfare and the office directors, the 14 office directors, they receive a report from our CQI division that shares with them, here's what you've reported in, self-report as far as children missing from care. And then we cross-reference that report with a report that we get from NCMEC so that we can make sure that if we've missed reporting a child to NCMEC, that we can catch that through that sort of cross-analysis that we've been doing.
In audit terms, we call that compensating control. So that's wonderful to hear. Thank you. You will hear from me next year in appropriations. I'm going to ask the question of, what can we do to support you all to ensure that you have enough investment to enhance your reporting and other things that, you might be able to do. I was really happy to hear about some of these federal government best practices, and we'll be asking what we can do to support you all from an foreign agency to maybe implement some of those. With that, I know my other colleagues here have questions, but Representative Paris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I want you to know that I'm still very angry with you for the phone call that you made to me a couple of weeks ago saying that you were departing for Doris Duke. I don't know what Doris Duke has over the great state of Connecticut, but I will allow for you to figure that out. And I want to join in the chorus of my colleagues by commending you for your exemplary career. And I don't know I know a lot of social workers. I know a lot of folks who have worked for Adult Protective Services, Department of Children and Families in multiple states. I don't know very many of them that have stayed for 37 years and have worked their ways up from the bottom to the very top. And I can say in our state government, there are very few commissioners, and I could be corrected if I'm wrong, but there are very few commissioners that knows how an agency works from every single level the way that you do. And so I commend you for your work. I will find it in my heart to forgive you at some point in time. But I do believe that this is a tremendous loss, not only for our state, but for families and children. And I would say, certainly, I was hopeful that the general public would be better educated and more aware of the limitations that your agency has against them and how we should be doing better to remove those limitations in an effort to protect not just the children of our state, but also families in this effort as well. I'm not going to be able to be with you for very long today, but I would request that before you depart, that you provide the ranking members and also my co-chair and vice chairs of the Children's Committee recommendations and next steps from your perspective as commissioner of what you would like your successor to focus on. The top 3 things or 3 to 5 things that have gone well under your watch and that you think that we can count upon and improve upon. And then our 5 biggest pitfalls that we need to improve. And those could be things that have been identified in the auditor's report, or they can be things that you're just seeing internally. But I would also like for you to place some focus and emphasis around the recruitment and retention of DCF employees throughout the various local offices, and then also the recruitment and retention of families and foster families in care, because we do know that that is the most critical piece. I will just say this. I just read an article today that a young man in Arkansas who has been in the system for 17 years finally got adopted. He was the longest held child in the state system in its history. 17 years, and he's 19 years old today. And I don't want to ever read a headline that a child has been lost for that long or has not been granted the proper care or placement with a family permanently. And so anything that you can do in your parting gift to us will be to help build a blueprint for us to get this right in your absence. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Representative Dauphiné.
Well, geez, Rep Paris, you really like, how do you outdo that, right? I do want to thank you. You've always been very, very responsive, and I appreciate that. Even though I may not have liked the answer, I've always been able to reach you and your staff and all of you, and I do appreciate that, and you will be missed. My question is you had talked about some states and you gave some other numbers comparing. Is there a state that's doing a better job with the kids that are running? And if so, I think to Rep Paris's question, maybe make suggestions, maybe with regard to what they're doing specifically and how we can get it better.
I appreciate that question. And I just cannot thank you for your kind words. It just means a whole lot, and your collaborative spirit from everybody, quite frankly. I just have felt that. And I also want to say, I'm leaving with I'm leaving you an amazing team. I sit up here and I speak, but I speak on behalf of this team. They will not miss a beat. I guarantee you they will not miss a beat on that. And I also appreciate the attention to our staff. We have amazing staff. When we were preparing for this, and maybe Vinny will get a chance to tell the story, but like, you're talking about staff that just go above and beyond looking for these kids over state lines, over just countless, like sacrificing their own families to go look for these kids. So I just wanted to just echo the sentiments of what we need to support the staff, keep staff in, and support the foster parents. A person is not up here right now. It's soon you will get to know her, Stacy Gerber. She's the newly minted Deputy Commissioner of Administration in the back. Stacy, wave your hand. Stacy has national experience, lots of national experience. And I asked her that very question about what are other states doing? And the answer is that everybody's trying to get their arms around it. What she did say to me, and what I have seen in my research, is creating an infrastructure that's routinized, where you're reporting on the kids, much like where we're going, but at higher levels. So, and being transparent about it. So what would it look like to be, have something that's, even public facing or whatever, where we're just trying to figure out all eyes are on these kids trying to do their best. I think that's probably what we're going to be working towards, making sure that we have routine cadence of meetings at higher levels to look at the efforts that are being done, because they're being done. It's just that it's not always known every day what everybody is doing. It's not getting up. So making that a little bit more transparent, that's one of the things that the other jurisdictions have been doing. But we constantly look to see what other states are doing. And that's why we're bringing people with national expertise to do so. I don't know if anybody else on my team has anything to add to that. No.
And then one other question was about the episode. So we were trying to clear up the length of the episode. So how exactly is the term episode defined?
Yeah.
And is the auditor's definition the same as DCF's definition? Because there was some confusion here when Revenue was asking about the 18 children and the 100 days. So if you could clarify that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
I do think that there was some conflating of some of the terminology. An episode counts when a child leaves when they're away from their placement or where they're supposed to be for any period of time, depending on the age. If it's a younger child under 13, we count it. So if they're supposed to come home at 3:00 and it's 3:30 and they're not there, that's an episode. Do you see what I'm saying? So those are counted every single time. And we had one child that had over 100 episodes. And so I'm not sure if that was the issue. And then I don't know. What I don't know, I would have to look up, is I think to your question, which was what was the amount of days a child was missing? Like, was it 100 days? So I think counting days and episodes are two totally different things. And so what the report focused on was episodes.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you for that. And the other thing that's a little bit difficult to kind of get clarity on is that I think you were describing, or in the report, it describes some of these children are missing, but you know where they are. For example, they may not have come home on the bus. They may have walked to their friend's house down the street or something. So it doesn't really give clarity to really what's going on. So I don't know if that could have been better clarified. So anyway, is that an
You
accurate?
are absolutely
Okay.
correct, which is why, missing from care can be like, oh my God, that's terrible. But the overwhelming majority, this is missing from care. AWOLs, the overwhelming majority are AWOLs, which means that they could be gone 5 minutes. They could be gone for an hour. They can be, and most of the time in those situations, all the time, we know where those kids are. We know exactly where they are, or they came right back and we have a handle on where they are. It's the runaways that make me stay up at night because we don't know where those kids are.
So we need to define runaways, episodes, AWOL, kind of get
Correct.
them all. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Representative Carney.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for all your years of service. You and I have not really worked together over my time here or your time as Commissioner, but what I can say is you certainly have a lot of institutional knowledge, and I really respect that, and the fact that you've been with the agency for so long. It really does help, and I'm hoping whomever replaces you has that same institutional knowledge, because you don't always see that with commissioners, and I really do appreciate all your dedication to an agency that is difficult, and you've really worked hard. So good luck in your next phase. I'm sure you'll do a good job there. My question, or I guess really two questions. So you did mention some improvements, and one of the things I would like to see, and I don't know if the auditors, I don't think they would necessarily do a follow-up so quickly, but if you could, or your staff could, get us a little bit more information on those improvements. I know you read them off, so we could see them and kind of like see how they relate to what the audit showed. So that would certainly be helpful. And I guess the other thing, the auditors mentioned, legislation kind of, to seek to clarify and things like that. One of my concerns is I guess I don't want the legislature to, we could talk about funding and staffing and that sort of thing. I always get a little concerned if we put in legislation, as a result of this that may be pushing it too much. So I'm just wondering if you think there's necessarily any legislation that you would propose to make any changes or improvements with this specific instance.
Thank you for that. And thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate that and agree with you. Having folks with institutional knowledge is very key to being successful in this role. So, yeah, I'm always leery to propose legislation where you don't really need it. I think I would hold off to say, let's see how this is going to see what is actually needed. I think we are nice and clear around what we weren't doing before that we need to start doing. And I think we need an opportunity to get a hold of our data system so that we can analyze the data in the way that I think the auditors were just, that they were trying to do. That is true. I mean, we had an unsophisticated data system. And so we need to be able to get to the point where we can analyze the data. I can tell you with 100% of certainty, though, that our staff do everything humanly possible to try to locate our kids. That I can tell you with a degree of certainty. How that's documented, are we analyzing it? Is it, that's the piece that we're working on. So I'm going to take seriously what you're saying. And even what Rep. Paris just said, you know, if there are things that I can think of as a team before I leave, we will make sure to do that. I'm always a little hesitant to legislate if you don't need to legislate, and certainly respect your opinion to do so if you feel like if it needs to be. But I would say, let me take that back and get some proposals to you if we as a team think that that needs to happen.
Okay, I really like that answer. I agree with you. If we don't need to legislate something, we shouldn't. So thank you for that. And again, good luck and thank you for your years of service to the state. So
Thank you very much. Representative Wieslander?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for your years of service. It's been lovely working with you, and I wish you all the best. I was wondering if you could, I'm looking at the trafficking and communication concerns that the audit put forward, and I appreciate recognizing the agency recognizing that there was improvement that was needed. Is the new data system, is that going to address those concerns in ensuring that the proper next step is being taken and that the proper reporting is being done?
Yes, the data system that we have, the CT Kind system, will house the data in a way that we can analyze it, make sure that it's uploaded consistently. I think the biggest shift is the documentation, making sure that you have consistent documentation, and that the new system will do that. The biggest shift is that where we were in error. If a child ran from a foster home, we would allow the foster parent to make the call to the police. The federal guidelines is that we needed to make that. So we needed to clean up our policy to make sure that people were clear that that shift needed to be made. And I just want to turn it over to Vinny in case he has some.
Thank you, Commissioner. And hi again. So yeah, I want to be very clear that, you know, when the Administration for Children and Families kind of found out about this in one of their annual reviews of our practice, and they had said that we were not in compliance with federal law on the issue about the department making the report. But we also took the opportunity to look at the different procedures and protocols that existed within the department, because there were many. The problem was they were kind of spread out among divisions because the different divisions were responsible for different activities with a child after they went missing. And so what the policy unit did is that we took all of those different practices, procedures, and pulled them all together into a practice guide. It's available, it's public information, it's available on our website. For those of you who like to look it up, on our policy page on our website, it's 21-15, that's the policy. 21-15 PG for practice guide is a practice guide. And what we really did in there, we did step-by-step processes for different employees in the department and what they have to do when a child goes missing and when a child returns. I would also say that I work very closely with our human trafficking director and our HEART teams, our multidisciplinary teams, which are fantastic. We work very closely with the Chief State's Attorney's Office and with others, of Order 146 that the Commissioner mentioned, FBI, where when a child is, when we think a child may have been trafficked or we know a child's been trafficked, that child is referred to those teams. And a lot of that assessment and referral occurs at that level because we really want to have a communal, collaborative approach to that child to make sure they have everything they need, but also that law enforcement is present to apprehend the perpetrator, more importantly. So that is something that has been built into the practice. It references our human trafficking policy, which also was on our online. Please feel free to look at that as well. They kind of coexist together in that way. And so I just want to make sure that was something that started about 1.5 years ago. Maybe actually now probably 2 years ago, because we adopted it in May, where we were going back and forth with the federal government, because what they told us essentially was if you don't at least show you're doing this step, you are going to lose federal dollars, and we did not want to do that. So that's why, plus we also wanted to have good policy, but I wanted to just put a point on it that this had started a while ago, and then it just sort of coincided with the audit as well.
Okay, thank you for that. And just to make sure I'm clarifying it, that the updated policy and practices, that has been made very clear to all agency employees, and it's also been made clear to anyone who might work as a third-party contractor, but still under the care umbrella of DCF, just to make sure that everyone knows what needs to happen so nothing can fall through the cracks.
Great question, Representative. Yes. So when a new policy, practice guide, form, under my name, my unit sends that policy out to all employees. Also through our supervision process, office directors are supposed to work with staff and notify them of the new procedures and policies. It does get incorporated in our trainings. So, and the great point about the providers, yes. And honestly, I kind of was hoping a provider might be able to attend today, because a lot of these incidences occurs in our congregate settings, and our providers are really on the ground and dealing with this in real time. And it's interesting because sometimes, we do want to make sure we report accordingly, that the police are supposed to be notified every time. Yet I've heard from legislators and your colleagues that police departments will get irritated for the constant calls. So it really is kind of a challenge to work. We really try to work within those confines. We go to the local communities, we meet with town officials and police and fire to try to figure out a way to manage the systems. Dr. Gregory and his team are really responsible for a lot of that, and they do great work. We've done additional trainings with our providers, particularly our star homes and other congregate settings. So I just, we've taken a lot of steps to do the best we can with a population that is sometimes a challenge to manage.
Thank you. And I just had one more question, and because I know we don't want to legislate if we don't have to legislate, but perhaps instead of it being a policy, it is, as the good chairwoman referred to, an appropriation concern. And wondering if expanding access to different types of care services, would that provide, would that actually result in a reduction, of children who are running? If one of the big findings is that by not being able to put kids where they would best be served, even if we know that's where they need to be, they can't because we have wait lists or the hospitals won't take them, what have it. If we give those opportunities for care, do you think that would actually result in less running?
I'm going to tee Dr. Gregory up to chime in at the end of this. It's a good question, and I think we have to provide those services, which we're in the middle of doing right now, to see if it does. I hope the answer to your question is yes. That's why we're trying to open up different levels of care, provide more therapeutic services, particularly in the star homes, and making sure that they have the intervention, the therapeutic interventions that they need. I think that's the question we all have to grapple with. Once we've instituted, or once we've stood up some of these, filled in some of these gaps with some of these services, I hope you'll see less running away. I'm hoping it's not a situation where kids feel invincible because they know they're not going to get arrested. I mean, I had a kid, we had a bench OTC on a youth that literally had an ankle bracelet and cut off the ankle bracelet. And then we got a bench OTC to us. And I mean, like, do you think we're going to stop the youth? You know what I'm saying? So we're trying to engage the youth in care, and we do an excellent job at many of our facilities. So we hope that would do it. And there is a gap. There is no question about whether or not we need different levels of service array to address the children's behavior, which is why we're standing up these services. So I hope the answer is yes, that it will reduce the number of AWOLs. But I want to turn it to Dr. Gregory to fill in anything I might have missed.
I would say yes, and if you think back 20 years ago, we had no shortage of residential treatment beds in the state, out of the state. So we had literally hundreds of kids who were pursuing care in that manner. We have very intentionally moved in a different direction. And so I appreciate that for some kids that sometimes there's a difficulty accessing what they believe to be what they need. I would caution that, we not make a direct sort of line to, so we need more beds, quote unquote. I also think that for many of the kids we're talking about, they're in the sort of life situation, their life context has communicated to them, or they've interpreted, I'm expendable. Nobody's really looking out for me. And so in many ways, some of what we see is their expression of despair or protest or really disengagement. And so I think as a system, it's not only how do we create resources for what do we do about where we are now, but do we have the resources for how this young person and their family got there, and are there those community supports necessary to, when we talk about prevention, to really prevent upstream? There's a lot of work being done, right, with transforming children's behavioral health and community-based supports for families, so that this doesn't happen. So I would say it's both and. And I would just add too, when Vinny mentioned the practice guide, we've also issued, there's a practice resource for congregate providers. So preventing AWOL in congregate care facilities. It really walks through how do you work with a youth and their significant stakeholders to understand the function of their running, and how do you proactively work with them to try to address what those needs are and respond to those challenges. And it's got, you know, protocols for planning and debriefing and things like that. So that's been a resource that we've made available to the providers as well.
So it may not be that we need to build a building or create beds, but it might be that we need to ensure that the kids have access to more regular or longer or more intensive therapies, and that there's potentially like wraparound services for their families, that might be an avenue to create that access to that care.
And I would add along the lines of the data, and this is something that's ongoing as well. As a system, I think one of our challenges has really been having the right data to be able to put our finger on where don't we have enough and of what and for whom. And so I think that's a continuing process, so that, and I also think it's important that we do that on a community level.
Mm-hmm.
So that on a local level, we know, okay, in, Greater Waterbury, what are we running short of? And what are families telling us that they need? And how can we target that? And that may be very different than what New London families are saying they need. And so some of those systems, I think, are that's a continuing challenge to really be able to have that actionable information in a way that's useful to families.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think, just to kind of follow on from that, it sounds like there could also be some training opportunities for the congregate homes. And I have some other questions I'm going to ask later, but I do think that that's an area where we need to support the people that support our kids. So thank you for highlighting that. Representative Lanu.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Madam Commissioner, very good to see you. And I want to certainly echo what my colleagues have said. It has been a true pleasure working with you. 37 years in the department, that's no easy task. And you truly started from the bottom. You worked your way up. You saw a lot of these kids firsthand throughout the years. And having that perspective in the corner office, being commissioner, is certainly invaluable. And I know you truly care about these kids. We've had many offline conversations. We met many times, and certainly I have no doubt on that. And it's really been a true pleasure working with you. And I truly want to commend you on your willingness to listen to new ideas and out of the box thinking is very important. So you will certainly be missed. And again, thank you so much for your service. And something else we have in common, where we both started as alum from Southern Connecticut State University. And I know you're very proud of that, as am I. And so it's I wish you well in your next chapter. And this was certainly a long one and a very good one. And and thank you so much for your service. But we do have this report, in front of us from the auditors. I think they did a commendable job. They gave some compelling testimony, and I certainly have concerns. I would the area I would go to, which I think I'm probably most concerned about, is assessment. And we have children under the age of 18 that are missing or leaving for a period of time. What are they doing in those periods of time that they're gone? I think we need to have answers to that. And the auditors identified 606 children in that 3-year period that were missing for a period of time. I want to know what they were doing, where they were, and I guess my question is, again, why can't we do these assessments? Why weren't these assessments done? And I'm not asking that judgmentally. I'm just really wondering, why didn't we have a formal assessment process where we're asking these kids, where were you?
First of all, thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate that. And it's been a pleasure working with you as well. As you know, I don't mind tough questions. I actually kind of like them. I don't know. And you definitely give me the opportunity to respond to the tough questions. So thank you for that. And thank you for your kind words about my career. Yeah, I'm not sure that depiction is exactly what we're experiencing. I would say that there are times when there is lack of documentation of assessment, and that needs to be addressed. And I think we fell on a sword for that, right? If were the formal reassessments done, those types of things. So in the report, we tried to be as transparent as possible where we fell short. But I don't think that characterization of how we respond to kids that are missing is all the way accurate, because we do follow up routinely, I mean, routinely and vigorously to when a child has left. And we often, I would say 99% of the time, maybe that's a little too high, maybe 90% of the time, we know exactly where the kids are. We just can't make them come back. So if your child ran away, 16 years old, and says, I'm going to Aunt Lucy's house, right? And then she don't want to come back, right? What in the law can force her to come back at that age? I mean, that's what we're dealing with. It could be Aunt Lucy. It could be a friend of a friend's. And so oftentimes our kids will run and they'll go back home after we place them. We can't we can't return them, right? Legally. Or they'll go somewhere where we have to assess where they are and they won't pass a licensing standard. So we can't license them as a foster home. So we're trying to figure out what to do. You send the police out there. What do you think what do you think the child's going to do when you send the police out there, right? They're going to run, right? And so if the police arrest, let's play this out. You arrest a child for running. What is the police going to do? Are they going to detain that child for that? We don't do that, right? So it's the engagement of the youth and what efforts we make to try to entice the youth, try to deal with whatever's happening with the trauma to convince them to stay. Remember, we don't have locked facilities. So it's not that we don't know where they are the overwhelming majority of the time and are not assessing them. It's a question of what can we do within our authority to do something when a child is running. I just want to turn it over to you if you had anything.
Yeah, I appreciate what the commissioner is saying, and I appreciate the question because I know we're concerned about every one of our young people who go missing. And as was already stated, the vast majority, we know where they are. So I get all of the significant events for children that go AWOL across the state. I was reading one yesterday. The young man said, I'm going to take a walk. And the facility said, rightly so, you just got here. You haven't reached the level where we believe that you can go take a walk. You're not allowed to go. It's going to count as an AWOL. And he said, I don't care. And he went and took his walk. Some young people even say, I'm leaving. And they're like, no, you're not. Where you going? And they're like, I'll be back in a couple of hours. And they come back in a couple of hours. They go do what they want. So I can appreciate what the commissioner is raising. To answer your question specifically, though, about the formal assessment, what we don't have a formal assessment, which we acknowledged. We have guidance, though, for staff around what they should be talking to our young people about when they return. And some of the reason that the assessment isn't formal or hasn't been formal is because the situations vary so significantly based upon the child's age, whether or not they're a threat to themselves or others, whether or not they have experienced any form of sex trafficking, whether or not they have any serious medical conditions. So based upon the needs of the child, whether the child is placed with a family or in a group care setting, who the service providers are, whether the family members are involved, sometimes that assessment can look very different. And as the commissioner indicated, it does, every conversation our social workers have with youth, the totality of that conversation doesn't get documented in our electronic case record. And the way our link system was set up, it was in running narrative that the auditors did a good job really trying to read through and comb through. But I know as a social worker, when I was a social worker many years ago, some of the best work is done in the car. Some of the best work is done when you're one-on-one with that kid. Now, you're not going to go back to the office and necessarily document the conversation, where I think most of our social workers understand the kids on their caseloads very well, and they know why they're running, and they know their trauma, and they know the struggles that they've had, and why they might be doing something, but it may not all get documented as well. And I think that's something that we are trying to do a better job with.
And I appreciate that. And I understand, I appreciate both answers. The commissioner mentions the 16-year-old daughter that wants to go to Aunt Lucy's house. And I have no doubt, makes me want to go too. So I'm waiting for my invitation. So I get it. But the thing is, when we have our auditors doing their job, right, and they come in, I think it would be certainly helpful where they can pull an assessment, and I think comment sections where the caseworker, the social worker from DCF can put comments down where they can look at that and say, okay, the youth, a 16-year-old went to Aunt Lucy's house, compared to this youth was recruited through some sort of criminal syndicate of sex trafficking, of God knows what else. Those are very, very different examples. We need something where when these good auditors go in, they can quantify that and qualify that somehow. So I think that's where it's super important. And I get 606 cases. Sometimes kids could be gone for a day, like you mentioned, Madam Commissioner. They might be coming back late 20 minutes from the ballpark, right? My concern, and I heard this during testimony as well from the auditors, is there were 18 kids or 18 episodes where the children were under 13 years old, right? There was they also testified that approximately 12 kids were missing for over 101 days, consecutively, right? A stretch of 101 days or more at one time, right? So we're talking, assuming each one is a different child, that's 30 kids over a 3-year period. I don't think it's a tall ask to, at least with those kids in those particular set of circumstances, to have an assessment report, because I want to know where the hell were these kids for over 100 days. I think we need to have that. Our auditors certainly need that. And a child under 13 years old that's missing for any period of time. So we're talking elementary school level. I want to know, I think we need to at least have that, right? Does our work end there? Not by a long shot, but I think we need to at least have that very quickly. And then also my other concern is I think if we do go forward with an assessment, we explore that perhaps legislatively or regulatorily. If you guys can do it as a department and it doesn't require legislation, great. But I think the other key component here is who's conducting the assessment, who's doing the assessment on these kids, right? Is it where the environment that they came from, or is it somebody that can be that's fresh, that's outside of that environment, that can do the assessment in a way to say, is it the environment that they came from is the reason why they're perhaps leaving or going missing or running away? I think those are the answers we need to get. And I think we got to be clear who does the assessment as well. But I look forward to working with the department more on this. Commissioner, I wish you were the one we're going to continue to work with on this. You got a great team as well, but you will be missed. Thank you for taking the tough questions right to the end, and please stay in touch with the Capitol. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Senator Marr.
I will not be long. What else am I going to say? I mean, I'm going to miss you so much. Really, it's been a pleasure. You're such a professional. You bring so much knowledge, experience, and passion and heart to this position that while I know you have a great team, you will be missed very, very much. My question is around the data. We know that 3 years ago, when I first took over the chair of the Children's Committee in the Senate, I had a long conversation with Commissioner Durantes to talk about the lack of data. The fact that when you go in to look for information, you can't search because it's written out and it's not drop-down menus, and there's no way of collecting. And I know how frustrating it was for you, for everyone else in the agency. My hope is not only that this new data, Connecticut kind, is going to be robust in terms of what information it's going to give us, but that the ongoing training and holding the workers to, their feet to the edge to make sure that all of this information is collected so that we, to your point, Representative Lanu, when we need to know why, we will have the answers. And I know that this was a painful process and long time in coming and with fits and starts, but we need this. And the agency needs it so we can tell the story. We can tell the story to the public and in any other way it needs to be told. And it can give us trends and future ways to do better. So I want to thank you for getting that in place. And I really look forward to seeing it as it comes out. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I can't reiterate that we just have 2 newly minted deputy commissioners, one who is over the CT Kind system. And the reason states don't go forward with implementing systems like that is because implementation is beyond painful. And you have to get over the hurdles and all that kind of stuff, which we're doing right now. But when I say we have the best person who is going to ride that's in Stacy Gerber. So I think if anybody can get it done, it'll be Stacy Gerber over there. On the practice side, you couldn't get a more compassionate leader who is supportive of staff and not afraid to hold everybody accountable. That's the one thing that I will say. When we mess up, we mess up. I will tell you when we mess up. I promise you. And that's what I try to tell my staff, and I hope they will do going forward. So we will be accountable and hold the feet to the fire as we support. I think contextually, what you all have done is just oftentimes when we're sitting here, there's just a lack of information about the difficulty and the challenge of what we have in front of us. It is an impossible job that heroes and sheroes get up and do every day. I don't know how they do it, but they get up and they do it every day. Do we have our share of folks that you're just like, when you go to the church and the ushers mean, it's like, isn't that, is that what you're supposed to do? We all have staff in places. I'm sure you all have it too. It doesn't matter where you are, that we probably is not a good fit. Right. And we handle those. But the overwhelming majority of our staff who show up do so at their own peril and at the peril of their own families to try to address these tremendous and complex challenges that our families are facing. And we applaud them and we hold them accountable when deemed necessary and appropriate.
Great. Thank you very much. Just for the quick question on CT Kind, is that an internally developed software or is that bought from a third-party software developer?
We contracted with Deloitte to implement this, and we have an amazing team inside of CT, government infrastructure with BITS. So we worked alongside of in-state folks, in-house folks in DCF, and the Deloitte team. So together, we're all getting it together, and they're on it. But it's been painful, and a lot of people don't do it because it's painful. And I don't know of any jurisdiction at this point in the United States that is in complete compliance with the federal standards for their data system. It's just really hard to do. It's very few, if there are any. And if we get this and we do this right, we will be one of the jurisdictions that is compliant with the federal government. So, but it's going to be painful, and it is painful, and we're getting through it.
Well, just from your response and some of these other things, it sounds like the automatic notifications, the real-time response is going to facilitate the jobs of hopefully everyone in your agency and your group. So thank you. I have Representative Vale, who has been waiting very patiently.
I forgot what I was going to say. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Thank you. I've never had the opportunity to engage with you because I'm on the oversight committee, and it's a newly formed committee. And I think it's pretty important. Seems like it's, unfortunate for me that I haven't, with all the accolades I've heard from everyone that's talked about the job you've done. So that's high praise for you. Again, the auditor's report, I think if you think of DCF, years ago, I worked in the courthouse and I worked in the juvenile court, and I had some interaction in Rockville with DCF over there, and just seeing how difficult that job is. And it's also like the public opinion of DCF isn't always a good one, right? And so I understand that you may be doing hard work, and then you're going to be noticed more for the failures than you are the successes. And, that can be difficult. But I actually think something like this, bringing transparency to it, is actually something that can be used to change that narrative, right? It shows everybody. The auditors, I thought, did a great job. But there's things in here, like our representative, if you look at it without really getting a good explanation, are pretty concerning. And you look at, I'm much more knowledgeable about this now than we started 2 hours and 45 minutes ago. But my questions are all follow-ups, and they should be pretty quick. Going back, I'm someone that last way I ever want to address an issue is through legislation. So I agree with you on that. There was a recommendation by the auditors that we do legislate it to line up with the federal guidelines, and you would still think that that's not necessary?
I mean, I personally don't think it's necessary, but again, I would, if you all feel like that's something we could do, it's a win-win for us. I mean, because we're going to line up with the federal government because we want to receive our federal reimbursement. But I would acquiesce to you all. I agree with your statements and my earlier statements that if we don't have to legislate, then why do it? But if it's going to help, there are times when we propose statute change and things like that. If it's going to help, at the end of the day, I will tell you, these people, those people out there, and these people out up here, the only thing we care about is these children are safe and secure. So whatever we have to do to make that happen, you won't get any opposition here.
Yeah. And that's what we care about as well, obviously. And all right. So I just wanted to ask your opinion on that one last time. The AWOL situation, which now I understand a lot better. And I believe you said there were 15 kids that accounted for 51% of those numbers, and one kid in particular that accounted for over 100. So is there any way to address that specifically when you have kids who are chronically AWOL? Do you have a different policy and procedure than maybe a kid with a 1 off or a 2 off where they were 10 minutes late or something like that? But if somebody's 100 late 100 times, that's not great. That's a behavioral problem, I would think. And is there any accountability? Do the kids, are they held to any accountability? And if so, is there any consequence to being AWOL 100 times or any times or anything like that? And should there be?
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's where I said, I mean, I hope that we all could put our heads together to figure out what we could do. And I'm going to tee up Dr. Gregory for this one. I am concerned about those kids that are missing or that are AWOL repeatedly. Because what are they doing? You know, what are they doing while they're out there? And I'm really concerned about that particular population being involved in human trafficking, right? And so in terms of accountability, that is the issue. I mean, I think we're systemically, our hands are a little bit tied. You can't lock them up, right? I mean, you can take away privileges. I know that we had one situation at our Solnit facility where there was a kid who was on the lowest level possible because you just would never expect for this child to have run because of the behavior, so on and so forth, and he ran. There were other kids where you know that they are likely to run, so their privileges are different than those who are likely to run. So there are things already in place, but short of locking them up, we can't prohibit it, if you will, not in the overwhelming majority of our facilities. Dr. Gregory, I just wanted to tee you up for that if you wanted to add anything.
I'd agree. And I think it's important to think when we talk again about the function of AWOL for different kids, in the context of a program where part of the quote unquote rules is that you stay there. So yes, a kid who's AWOL, I guess, breaking the rules, but I think we want to move away from seeing AWOL merely as non-compliance, right? And so how do we get more strict or more, and so not that that's exactly what you're saying, but I think it's complicated. If we see AWOL as a function of I'm disengaged, I'm disconnected, I'm fairly despairing, and I'm really angry about the hand I've been given, and I don't trust any of you. Well, there's only so many rules or consequences, or I should maybe say there aren't a lot of rules or consequences that are going to get at that. So how do we continue to support the providers in a treatment setting to really continue to give that kid the experience that we do see you, we do care, we are here. You can't trust us yet, but we're willing to stay with you and keep trying to earn it. And the challenge with the AWOL is, right, that what we see is so many kids who struggle to give the adults and the system that chance because of their lived experience that they're not willing to trust that. And so I don't mean to be Pollyannish, but I think those are really some of the, if we enter into the struggle of, so I think the if you were to say, what more can we do? I do think the more we can continue to raise this up, to really to shed light on this, to engage with the families and the kids and the providers around what else do you need? So I don't mean to, the commissioner says I give sometimes long answers and round, but this is my gift to her to be consistent. So because the other thing is, if part of a function of a kid's AWOL is that they are resisting your attempt to tell me what to do, well, you're telling me to do more is only going to be counterproductive and probably result in my running more. So it's challenging.
And I can understand that. And I think my concern is that we take a cookie cutter approach to that, because there could be kids that need that understanding, and there could be kids that are just taking advantage of that situation. And I don't know how you figure out which is which. But I don't know that we always have to have a cookie cutter approach to that. Sometimes a little structure doesn't hurt as well. So just maybe something we could continue to focus on, and it would make your numbers look a lot better in an audit if, you just kind of, we have the big issues to deal with, but maybe polish up some of that stuff and try to reel that in. That's, again, just a suggestion. And just one last thing, I don't know if you heard, I asked questions to auditor on, they talked about the gap of treatment and placement. And I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, but they suggest that you guys come up with a plan where, it seems like we go from inpatient is too much, treatment or more than what they need, or maybe a foster placement is less than what they need. And there's a lot of kids that fall in the middle. Is there, and they suggested that, I think that you guys develop a plan for that. Is that something that's ongoing and something that you'll be continuing to work on?
Yeah, as I said in my opening statements, we are looking to introduce to the treatment continuum some treatment interventions that we believe will address some of those gaps that we have, and we'll see. And we'll see if that is actually it. So to Dr. Gregory's point a little while ago, we don't want to build a bunch of beds and then you have more kids running from the beds that we have. So we're introducing different levels of care with the subacute and with the ITTC. I always say the wrong thing, ITTC. Those will be on the ground, and we'll see what impact it has, because we think that that will address some of those gaps that were articulated earlier. My guess is that the issue is more because a lot of times kids are going home, to the home that we took them from, or to the relatives that we took them from, right? And to the point earlier, I just want to just make sure I say this out loud. The overwhelming majority of the kids that go missing are AWOL, which means we know where they are, right? It's just that we can't authorize where they are. So it's not for lack of assessment. Only 2 kids in the whole 3 period were on runaway, and we didn't know where they were. And then the 1 kid we found, and 1 child is still at large. So we know where they are. It's just a matter of how do you make them comply with staying where they need to be. That's the hard part. It is just hard. Part of it is therapeutic. I mean, we've done things like we've explored putting delayed locks on some of the facilities so that when they go, they can't go right away, but then you get into fire trouble if you don't, you know what I mean? Like you get dinged on the other side. So we're exploring all kinds of other things that we can do to slow it down so that they're not running from some of our facilities. But I agree with you. All things on the table, all hands on deck. I just operate that way. I don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. And so I welcome the opportunity to come before you today. Welcomed it.
One last statement. I just think it's important. I think it's reiterated that when you do try these new things, that you keep track of the data, so we can follow this. I think that's where some of this, maybe we could tighten this data up a little bit, maybe differentiate from when someone just went home where they weren't supposed to be and maybe they went somewhere else. So I appreciate your patience and thank you for your answers.
Great. Thank you, Representative. I think everyone had such great questions. The agency not only are trying to keep everyone safe, but you're also trying to teach these young people how to fly. And in many circumstances, they have not been told that before they got involved with your agency. So it is a huge job. I mean, I know as a parent, just even teaching my children how to manage growing up in today's society is a challenge, and I can't even imagine with what you all have to think about. Because I am a numbers person, and I think a lot about numbers and how things are going. In terms of looking at federal funding that is coming into your agency. I understand that wasn't the scope of this audit, but I do think a lot about right now your agency receives in the tens of millions of dollars from the federal government. We think a lot about these circumstances that children get into DCF in the first place. Many of these families are, WIC recipients, SNAP recipients, TANF recipients. There is the separation effect and the mental sort of abandonment issues that children might face as a result of different policies that are happening. I'm wondering if your agency does sort of track these situations to understand about what these sort of federal policies could mean to your caseload, and also the maybe some of the effect of some of the funding shortfalls that some of these programs that I talked about.
Going to queue up our general counsel to talk to you about some of the active efforts that we're doing in preparation and anticipation of what is to come. But to answer your question directly, yeah, we're really concerned about the impact of supports, change in supports that our families may have. A lot of, we did a lot to differentiate between poverty and neglect. And to not take families into care or kids into care because of poverty. And I worry about as the resources, decrease, what impact that's going to have on our department and CPS agencies across the United States. And I will tell you, in my new role, that's going to be something that I would be looking to see how to support Child Protective Service agencies. So I'll cue our general counsel up, Susan Hamilton, to talk about our active efforts.
Now it really is good evening. So thank you for the question. The commissioner, as always, really teed that up nicely. I mean, I think all of the department and all of our sister agencies are really trying to contingency plan for any changes that are happening at the federal level that could impact some of the safety net services that we know families are likely to experience. And so fortunately at this point, DCF's budget, its own budget, has not been directly impacted, but we likely will see the impact on the families that we serve because they will be impacted through these other ways. And I'll echo the commissioner. She says regularly that we really feel so blessed to be in Connecticut right now because there is a lot of planning and thought around how do we anticipate, and then how do we plan for what those gaps might look like, while at the same time also trying to make sure that we're providing support to our families that we're serving as far as some of the fear and anxiety that some are feeling. So I think that's the short answer. I think that we are positioning ourselves well to make sure that we can try to address any of those gaps in funding. But they will likely be experienced, and some are already, I think, being experienced by some of our families.
I think one area that we don't talk a lot about, we talk a lot about SNAP, we talk about WIC, and we talk about TANF, and we see that those horrible effects. But one of the things that we hear in appropriations a lot is about staffing shortages when it comes to particularly social workers. And you think about some of the other early education training programs and maybe some of the training programs we talked about here. And you think about the elimination of the support for student loans. And many of the people that you are looking to employ or the people that are being employed by these congregate facilities um, will have gotten that training and relied on those federal grants to support their educational future. And to think about some of your people that are in your system now that are going to be wanting to rely on those and how that will affect our workforce. Um, Not even talking about immigration issues that might also affect our workforce. I'm talking about the effect of student loans and the ability, because a lot of these jobs are below the sort of average that will be captured by that student loan programs. So I am looking forward to continuing to see this. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you folks in appropriations. And we're going to bring a picture of you, Commissioner, and we'll just be thinking of you at the time. But I do hope that we'll have this discussion as the session kind of starts up and we get involved in appropriations, because those are some of the key things. And I know our good chairs of the Children's Committee are going to be, this is going to be front and foremost in their minds as well. So with that, I think, because I like you so much, Representative Vale, I'm going to give you that honor.
It goes with the workload. What's the average caseload of a DCF worker? How many cases will they work on simultaneously?
I'm gonna let our newly minted DC answer that question with a level of specificity that would meet your, I think, expectations. So, go ahead.
I think the simplest answer to give you is about 12 to 15.
And 12 to 15 is a lower caseload than we had historically. The problem is the workload and the complexity of the kids requires, I think, a different level of attention. So that is something that we're keeping our eye on, because we're not dealing with the same families and the same issues that we were 10 years ago. So even though it's lower, the amount of work is probably doubled or tripled, which I would support. My parting wishes is that that number is much lower than 10, than 10 to, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, it's a lot. It's very complicated and it's a lot. That's all I'll say.
Well, I remember a couple of years ago, and I'm digressing, but the former commissioner was on Where We Live, and she did a wonderful talk about this. And it was during the pandemic that she came on and talked about the caseload and the complexity that's having to face your agency. And so I thought you had big shoes to fill when she left, and I just see that you've taken the agency and really gone a bit further, especially implementing the CT kind. And I'm really looking forward to hearing how that facilitates, and hopefully that will make things go documentation wise go smoother, but also really help the communication between the various folks so that we know that we're able to understand. So again, thank you so much for doing that. And I look forward to seeing you all in February in appropriations. And thank you, Commissioner, for your time this evening. To my good chair of Children's, would you like to have any closing remarks before we sign off?
I actually would. Thank you, Madam Chair. What you just referenced about the caseload being lower, and I'm really glad to hear that the caseload's lower from what I've read. But what you also referenced about the acuity and the increased need and what that workload looks like now than what it used to look, than how it used to look, is I think a direct correlation to the knowledge that we have about our systems of care, the impact on families, the need to have a community of care around our families. And so it's about the child, but it's about the lived environment that the child is in. So thank you for making that point. I want to put a really big pin in it for when it comes to appropriations and making sure that we have enough staff at DCF to do the work, both for welfare and for behavioral health. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Guydcar Wilcox, would you like to have any closing remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I just wanted to thank everyone for today and for this convening.
Wonderful. I think our other ones have had to get onto their other events this evening. But I'm going to go ahead and close this informational hearing and wish everyone a very happy Labor Day weekend. I hope you have some relaxing time with your family. And again, Commissioner, thank you again for all your service over the years.